Good evening and welcome to the regular Park Board meeting, Tuesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. I'd like to call to order the meeting. First, John, you had some...
If I may, we have a new staff person that would like our Assistant Director, Ann Catry, to introduce, to have her come forward to the podium. Ann?
Thank you, John. I have the pleasure and excitement to introduce Susan Foss. She is the new manager of Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes, and she started yesterday. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to have you all meet her. And I'd like to ask her if she would come up and just give a little bit of a brief background of her education and work experience that has brought her to Edina.
Thanks, Ann, and good evening. I promise I won't take too much time. I'm sure we've got a pretty full agenda this evening. But, I just to kind of start out, and I'll go way back, I grew up in Cold Spring, a little town outside of St. Cloud, and did my undergraduate work at North Dakota State University. Got my degree in exercise science. Also played basketball and ran track there while I was attending NDSU. I went on to get my master's degree at the University of Kentucky in sport management. And really professionally, the last 12 years, I have worked at the YMCA. Started out in Lexington, Kentucky, and then in 2006 moved up here to the Twin Cities to work for the St. Paul Association. Always been very, very passionate about wellness and recreation, so I'm really, really excited about this opportunity to work with a great team here in Edina. I had the pleasure yesterday of meeting quite a few of my new coworkers. It felt like about 500, but I don't think it was that many. But I'm really excited. I understand there's some real opportunities at both Edinburgh Park and the Aquatic Center, and I'm just really excited to get started, and I'm looking for those the possibilities to come in the future. So thank you, and have a great evening. Thanks.
Thank you and welcome to Edina. Roll call, Janet, please. Oh, excuse me. We have a couple new people we'd like to introduce here. We had 3 outgoing Park Board members. One of whom was Randy Meyer from the school board, and now we have Kathy Sella. So thank you, Kathy, for joining us, as well as Dan Giske and Catherine Peterson. Welcome. And I won't put you on the spot to tonight, at least. Roll call, Janet, please.
Member Dan Peterson. Member Segreto. Here. Member Sella. Here. Member Deeds. Here. Member Hulbert.
Here.
Member Giesecke.
Here.
Member Catherine Peterson.
Here.
Member Jones.
Here.
Member Steele.
Here.
Member Jacobson.
Here.
Any additions or changes to the meeting agenda? All in favor? Aye. Adoption of the consent agenda for the evening?
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Community comment. If anybody has anything that they'd like to come up and discuss that's not on the evening's agenda, please feel free to do so.
I actually had an amendment to the minutes of the special meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can we do this?
Sure.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys want to reread this. The new members weren't at the meeting, I know. But I have a couple insertions. And this is to the minutes of the January 23rd special meeting. Insert to page 2, the 4th paragraph. And this is this section where I was talking quite a bit, and so I don't blame Janet for not including everything. But I actually quoted the comprehensive plan, and I thought that that was an important bit of information regarding the enterprise entities. And in the comprehensive plan, so I would insert the following statement. Our goals are stated in the comprehensive plan, chapter 9, page 45. They are, number 1, for each of Edina's enterprise facilities, provide recreational opportunities that are accessible and affordable to primarily, but not exclusively, Edina residents, and yet remain competitively priced in the Twin Cities area. Number 2, provide fee-based revenue generating recreation enterprise facilities that collectively cover all facility and program expenses, including capital improvements, land purchase, and all operating expenses. So I would like to amend the minutes to include those statements. I don't know if you want to do this
Is that it, or is there
collectively.
anything
No,
else?
there's two more.
Why don't you go through all
Okay.
of them?
And the other two would be inserted into the minutes to the top of page 5. New paragraphs following, Mr. Anderson replied, that is correct. Member Jones asked, how will the high school players access the other two non-adjacent rinks? Mr. Anderson replied, through a tunnel system, and he projected a diagram of a path running from the proposed new building along the outer east side of the west rink. Member Jones asked if construction costs for this tunnel were included in the construction costs included in the packet. Mr. Anderson replied, yes, they were included. Another new paragraph. Member Jones asked if the large hallway running north to south along the proposed new building was designed especially wide so that it would accommodate a Zamboni to exit the stadium and an ambulance to enter the stadium. Mr. Anderson replied, yes, that interior hall will be wide enough to allow an ambulance and the Zamboni to travel past the locker room entrances and access the rink. And I propose that the meeting minutes are amended to include those.
I would make a motion to make those amendments. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you, Ellen. All right, back to community comment. Is there anybody that would like to discuss something that's not on the evening's agenda?
If I could just make one announcement. For those of you who are visiting tonight, be sure you've signed in. There's a sheet just outside the glass doors. We ask for your name and address. Thank you.
Okay, let's move along here. Item 7 is the Hornet's Nest proposal at Braemar. I think I'm out of order. There we go. Are we going to have a follow-up with any of the questions that we had last week, or?
Well, what I would recommend, a couple things. I believe all the questions that the Park Board gave both Susie Miller and Mr. Anderson at the last meeting, those hopefully all got answered in the packet that you've received. And I think the way I would recommend it goes tonight, if you have specific questions about that information, call one or both of them forward and ask your questions, and then you can debate the issue up here and decide where you want it to go. And then it becomes your call whether or not to open it up then to public comment at the end.
I had a question in regards to the scale of the facility in comparison to other locker rooms, and I didn't see that. Am I missing that here? Or
The square footage?
yeah.
That I can't answer. Susie, is that something that you're, or Eric, either one of you able to respond to that question?
Yeah, the scale of the facility, when we're looking at each one of the locker rooms, and I want to grab the dimensions here so that I have them in front of me. The locker rooms
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but could you state your name and address?
Yes,
too?
I'm sorry. My name is Eric Anderson. My address is 6501 Indian Hills Road in Edina. The dimensions of the locker rooms are about 62 by 50 feet. And when you compare that to some of the other locker rooms that we looked at in the presentation previously, to Minnetonka and to Wayzata, et cetera, they're comparable in size. The shower facilities are perhaps a little bit larger than what you would see in some of the other facilities.
Does anybody else have any follow-up questions?
Well, I was really, thank you for the staff report, John. I thought it was really very helpful. I was really struck by the participation of school boards, whether it be a public arena or a privately owned arena. And I remember from our last presentation that the school board had been contacted, but felt that, now I don't know that these were the words that I heard, but that they could not participate financially. Am I correct? Okay. I'm wondering whether or not we could reopen the dialogue. Maybe Kathy Sella could help me with this. I mean, how could we explore maybe on another level what the school board might do for us in terms of participating in the arena project?
And as you know,
Could you hit your microphone for me?
I'm sorry. That would have to come through the school board's committee structure. It would go to finance and facilities first, but as you're aware, last year the school board cut $2.5 million from its budget in our Berg process, and this year we'll be looking to make more adjustments to our budget, cutting maybe upwards of another $500,000. So spending money to improve locker rooms coming out of our athletic budget would be something that would have to be put in the hopper and consider with all the other cuts that we're making to add something like that into the budget. It could come, a proposal could be brought to our Finance and Facilities Committee and could be discussed, but at this point I have no authority to say yay or nay to something like that.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't think that you would, but I just think in light of the project, zero participation from our school board is hard for me to fathom.
And I just have one other question. We're being asked to approve a concept, the concept of this, and I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about what that might mean.
That was actually my question. I'm not exactly sure what we're voting on, and so I guess, John, can I ask you, since you put this together, what do you see as the, as an affirmative vote entailing and authorizing?
Well, I think what's in front of you tonight, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, this group has come forward and worked awfully hard for several months, whose, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, whose first priority is to get locker rooms, permanent locker rooms, that meets Edina's standards for the varsity and junior varsity. And they have found what they believe to be a very creative way to finance that. And I think it's fair to say, and as I've expressed in my staff report, what is a very big interest to the city financially to run Braemar Arena, and I think Susie Miller's done an excellent job of showing the numbers, is the dryland training facility. Even if locker rooms don't happen, it's something that should be on our radar screen. The creative addition of the restaurant, the quick serve restaurant, and the pro shop is another creative way to help pay for the lease revenue bonds. I think what's in front of you is, do you agree with that particular concept? Do you agree with its location? And if there's parts of it that are troubling, that aren't acceptable, do you want to pursue a different approach to this to at least get the two main components, the locker room and the training facility? Is there another way to get this done, to keep it moving forward? That would be, as a staff, as I expressed in my staff report, to not just stick a fork in it if we have issues with the size, the location, the restaurant, the pro shop, whatever the issues might be, that to find whatever needs to be done and explored and further studied. So hopefully we can come to whatever demands you want to place on them to move this forward then to the city council.
Can I just throw something out and see what people think here? I think when you read like the recommendation of approving the Hornet's Nest proposal, there might be some elements of the proposal that we saw a month ago that some people have some questions on. So if you look at the proposal, there's various elements to it, you know, and if you were to rank, if you say there's 4 main elements, you've got locker rooms, we have dryland training facilities, you have food, and you have retail. And as I thought about it, and you rank those 4, I think we're here for locker rooms, right? I mean, that's the main thing. And number 2 would probably be the dryland training facilities. 3 would be expanded food service, and 4 would be retail. And I think those 3 components come in there to try to find a way to service the bonding here. But the element that I think needs to be added is that Braemar Arena is a 45-year-old facility. How old is it? I think we're doing a disservice if we ignore the south end of the West Arena. So if we take a look at this and say, this is a proposal that we should be, I think, considering. So instead of saying approving the concept of the Hornet's Nest, if we just said we approve the concept of expanded locker rooms with potential new revenue sources and just move it maybe to the next step and just study it and bring in proponents from the Hornet's Nest, maybe bring in somebody from the school board, and I think it would be a missed opportunity not to explore this further.
John, or Joseph, I understand where you're coming from with this, and this is not the first time that I have struggled with the concept of looking at each of our enterprises separately. And that I am afraid that if we keep going down these paths of trying to figure out what is the best way to improve each one singularly, we may be making some choices down the road that we don't know we're making right now, because the city does not have unlimited finances. And by suggesting that we should look at this in a silo and say, oh, you know, what are the needs here in the arena, without thinking about, well, what do we need in Edinburgh? What do we need for a dome? What do we need for Centennial Lakes? And then separate from that is what is our mission? You know, is our mission to provide locker rooms for the school? Is this our part of our mission? I think we need to look at where does each of these proposals fit into in an aggregate sense. Where do all of these play out? What are our needs, total needs of the community, and see where each of these needs fit in. I would think that this is the type of discussion I'd like to have at our workshop with City Council March 13th. And that's what I would be proposing, is to find out from them how they could advise us to our next step in pursuing all of these different enterprise and non-enterprise park board needs. So I would be recommending that this be put on the agenda at the March 13th City Council meeting, so that we can either pursue it as a master plan for the Edina Parks and do a more comprehensive survey of our needs and prioritization of what those needs and what that might do to, how that might look like.
We have a group that has spent a lot of time, though, and there's no question in my mind, based on the presentations that I heard at our last meeting, the locker rooms are really embarrassing. Something needs to be done with the locker rooms. I'm convinced that a dry land training facility is in order also. As far as restaurant services and additional retail, I'm very concerned about the risk of that, but I like the idea of making good with the momentum that we already have, and let's work together with the group, with the school board, and at least examine the option of going forward and getting our locker rooms done and getting the dry land training facility done.
And I wasn't saying that I was against this project. It's just, it's hard to know what the priority is of the city as to this project versus any of the other needs.
On Sunday night, our user fees working group met with the athletic associations, and John updated the group, and he requested that each athletic association bring forward their requests for projects and what they would benefit from. So I'd be more comfortable if we could kind of see where other athletic groups, what their needs are compared to this, so just so that we get an idea moving forward of what requests will be coming in. I don't know if we could ask them to respond more quickly, or...
Well, I guess the way I'd respond to all that, and you make excellent points. If we delay this decision until all of the other issues that are currently on the council's plate are decided on, it's going to be a long time. I think we're in a very unique and challenging transitional stage for Edina. What to do with our facilities, and how valued are they? What kind of a financial commitment are they worth? They're currently wrestling with that with Edinburgh. The Arts Center, we just went through it with the golf course, and I'm sure there'll be others. We're also going to be studying the senior center. I think what's in front of you is ought to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I think you should deal with it as you feel it fits the plan for Edina, and rather than to pit this against another project and which one is of higher priority, I think you judge this on its own merit and how important it is to have this at Braemar. And I think if you wait to have a master plan for all 40 parks and all enterprise facilities, in my 30-some years of working here, things change every election year. A new politician to be is going to have a different platform and maybe a different view. And it's not even realistic hardly to think we can plan greater than about 5 years, because it changes. And that's just the way it is. That's not a criticism, that's just reality. So to wait to get such a grandiose picture, I don't think is realistic. I think you deal with this now. I think you deal with it how you feel it fits. Is it worth what it's going to cost, or is there a different way to do this? And not delay it until other things are studied, because you'd be waiting a very long time. That's my 2 cents.
First, the folks behind the Hornet's Nest, I really want to thank you. It's good work that you've done. I have the need is obvious. Anybody that's been around there, the pictures, I mean, the need in Braemar is for more than just locker rooms, to be honest. And one of my concerns with the plan as it stands is it solves the high school's locker room problem, but it doesn't solve Braemar's locker room problem. It's dedicated space to the high school and to the high school team locker rooms. There are a lot of other teams. There are visiting teams. There are a lot of other leagues and other things that go played in there. Those locker rooms don't solve the larger locker room problem. Now, that wasn't your focus, and I'm not faulting you on that, but as we begin to look at this and we begin to look at Braemar and what's necessary to bring it up to date, with a lot of our facilities, it's an interesting question. I don't want to lose the momentum, so I am in support of finding a way to keep the momentum and keep this moving forward. I don't want wording that says I approve the concept right now. I want to move it forward. I want to keep working on it. I want to get the board's input on it. I don't want to lose any time on this because those facilities are atrocious. That's just flat out, my opinion on it. So something needs to be done. And this is a heck of a proposal. And the willingness to come forward and put private backing, charitable backing to it is fantastic. But there are also other problems, as I said, the one end of the arena over there, and the fact that we need better locker rooms, period, for everybody else that will be using that arena, I think, is something that we need to consider. So given the need in this instance, in my estimation, I'm willing to support moving this forward, keeping the momentum, and also the fact that we have a group of people behind it that really want to get this done. All of it speaks to me as it's probably a pressing need. I do agree that we, as a city, do not have a plan as to what we're doing with our amenities. And while we can't put everything on hold until we figure that out, we better start figuring it out. We've gone, if I look at a lot of the facilities, it seems like for a decade or more, we've underfunded on maintenance. We've done the best we can. I think the parks, the Parks Department has done a wonderful job. But I think if we're going to stay current and competitive and the kind of city that we want Edina to be, we have simply underfunded the amenities in this city. We're not I'm not from here originally, so I'm taking this on, from neighbors. What was once leading edge of facilities in this state is no longer. And that requires the city, that requires the school board to step up too and take a look at these issues. There's a broader issue here that we have to look at. We can't put everything on hold until we get a look at it, though. And so I'm willing to support moving this proposal forward. I'm not willing to say I'm supporting the concept yet. I think that because I haven't seen alternatives to the concept, and I'm not sure it solves all of the problems that the city has. I think it does a very good job of solving the problems that the high school hockey teams have. And so I think there's potentially more to look at, and there may be shifts and changes in the concept to solve the broader issues that the city, as the owner of the facility, may want to look at. But let's keep it moving. Thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said tonight other than delaying it, because I don't see the delaying it. There isn't a financial commitment to putting together a working group to take a look at their proposal and seeing how this can be tweaked. And, it's a month, and these things take a lot of time anyways. And they've come to us with a proposal to solve an issue that the high school team has. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't come up with a concept. That also means some sort of new locker rooms or engineering this project in some way that there's locker rooms that can be used from varsity all the way down to termite, and that becomes something that the whole community can use. It's a gem of a facility. It's something we're never going to give up on, but like a 50-year-old building, you do need to reinvest in it every once in a while. And I learned that when it was built 50 years ago, the reason why the locker rooms are so small is because the high school team didn't want there to be locker rooms there. So now things have changed, so we do need to change with the time. So I would support moving this forward, and I don't know if, when I was saying the concept of expanded locker rooms, would that make you more comfortable versus the concept of the hornet's nest?
Yeah, I like it. Your wording was fine with me. Okay, so the way you had it worded was fine. I just don't want to right now say I'm supporting the concept of the hornet's nest as it stands. I want to see what else needs to be done. I want to put this in a little broader. I just don't know. To be honest, I just don't know enough at this point. I like your proposal, and I like what you've done, but as I think about it, I don't think it solves potentially all of the problems that the city has to deal with within Braemar Arena. So that's why I want to, that's why, again, I'd support your wording, Joseph.
So I move we create a working group.
Could I throw out just
Sure.
see what you think here? I was going to say potentially approving the concept of expanded locker rooms at Braemar with potential new revenue sources to be studied in a working group of 2 or more park board members, members of the Drive for the Hive, staff, and interested members of the public as a potential motion.
Could I suggest one more, and that we request representative from the school board?
Yeah, that's right. And
From the school district or both?
Joseph, could you read that again?
yeah. All right, should I just make a motion here? Can I make a motion? I can make, all right. Okay, I'd like to approve the concept of expanded locker rooms at Braemar with potential new revenue sources to be studied in a working group of 2 or more park board members, members of the Drive for the Hive, staff, interested members of the public, and school board representation.
Could I, do we need a second first?
We got
and then
one.
I can amend it?
No, I don't, I think, do we need a second before amendment? Oh, God, I've lost Rob. I think you can suggest an amendment. Go ahead.
Did you have a second to read?
Yeah, Dan said.
I'd like to include in that, though, a study of the needs of the arena. I don't want this to be just expanded locker rooms and potential revenue sources.
We've got items in our 5-year CIP. Are there things beyond that?
Yeah, in the notes here, John has identified. So I'd like the final report of the working group to address these things that deal with the facility needs.
I think that would be something that would be smart for this group to be looking at, is just the needs of the facility, not just throwing in varsity, JV locker rooms. And so I think
that's more consistent with the park board's mission.
Okay, I would accept that.
And I think we can do that whether it's in the motion or not.
Hold on.
You can consider that done.
Just to be a pain, we have to word it. So what is the wording of the amendment? I'm sorry.
Okay, so Joseph had said, and
How about to include a comprehensive needs assessment of
of the arena.
Yeah, the Braemar Arena. Good.
You need a second to that?
Oh, wait, there's a
Second.
discussion.
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask if we could amend the wording just slightly in a different place.
Go for it.
You, I think, said a school board representative, and you might want to say, we might want to say school district representative, because it might be more appropriate depending on what the working group would be actually talking about, to have our business manager or to have someone from our athletic department rather than someone from the school board.
Well, you have an amendment, if you want to follow Robert's rule. You do have an amendment and a second, and you can have discussion. You need to vote on that amendment first, and you can offer a second amendment.
Okay, that makes sense. So why don't we vote on the original with, and then we'll.
You vote on the amendment first.
Okay. All right, we've got 2 amendments.
Okay.
Well, she can't make another
First amendment over here.
amendment until you voted on the
Okay,
first.
there's a second. For all in favor of Ellen's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Now you can make a new motion for a new amendment.
Okay.
I would move to further amend your motion to change it from a school board representative to a school district representative so that we can have the people best capable of discussing the issues at the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, so then we've got a motion and a second on my motion here. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
So we need a working group chair.
Thank you very much. If anybody here on the park board is interested in being on that working group, think about it this week. Send John an email, or if you're interested.
And we'll decide then.
Any volunteers?
They don't have to commit.
All right.
They can
Think about it.
contact me, give it some thought.
Okay. That's not too bad. 40 minutes. Anybody have dinner reservations? All right, let's move along here to 7B, the Sports Dome presentation.
Okay, I'm going to key up your presentation on the
Good evening.
Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Harvey Feldman, and I live in at 9317 40.5 Avenue North, New Hope. And I'm representing Parks and Recreation Consultants.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Ken Vra, and as part of the Ken Vra Consulting, Harvey and I have teamed up along with Eric Blank. Eric is not here this evening. And I live in McGregor, Minnesota, on a lake.
All right. Thank you.
Well, we're pleased to submit the Edina Sports Dome financial feasibility study for your review. I know that all of you have copies of this document, or you should have. I first would like to express our deepest appreciation to the staff, city staff, especially to Ann, the Park Board Study Group, and all the organizations and individuals that we met with. When you are in a situation like yourself, it's important to remember that you're all volunteering your time. You have busy schedules, but it's important to hear the voices of the community members. Finally, we would like to present a summary of our report and our findings, and then take questions from you. First of all, our team, Ken, Eric, and myself have been directors of Parks and Recreation in St. Louis Park, Eagan, Maplewood, Plymouth, New Hope, and Richfield, and Superintendent of Administration and Park Board Secretary to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Our consulting experience has taken us to Eagan, Inver Grove Heights, Plymouth, New Hope, Richfield, Victoria, Edina, Winona, Lakeville, Elk River, Shakopee, Minneapolis Park Board, and Naperville Park District.
And I think just wanted to point out, too, that a couple of those studies really are feasibility studies that kind of mirror the dome, although the community center study for Shakopee and Winona was, again, a feasibility study. So it kind of mirrors this, which I think are relatively important for you.
We want you to know our code, how we operate. First and foremost, we will honor the specific vision, goals, and objectives of the city. We respect the uniqueness of the city and its values. We place high importance to the express needs of the residents and the major user groups. We will be, in this report, as you already know, fiscally conservative in our financial analysis of the potential project. We want to provide as accurate a picture as possible, but not to deliver on an expectation. And we understand, first and foremost, that the final decision is yours. Our process
was really quite simple. After meeting with your staff, we started what would really be the data collection phase. And with that, we took home quite a few file documents from John. We visited a lot of your facilities just to see what they looked like. We looked at your school district enrollment projections for the next 5 years to understand your demographics, because you're obviously looking for something that's going to last for 1 year, but for a long time. Do you have the demographics that can support this facility and support the associations? So our data collection phase didn't end there, obviously. We met with each of the major associations. We had face-to-face meetings with them, with the soccer club, the baseball group, lacrosse. We had telephone conversations with some of the, I don't want to say minor sports, but the less interested sports, softball, adult softball. We met with the athletic director at the high school. And from this, we were able to glean from them not only what they thought they needed, but some additional information which we think helped us as we went through the second phase, and that really was the analysis aspect of in putting together this report.
We especially paid attention to Edina's vision and the mission. Clearly, it's a place for living, learning, raising families, and doing business distinguished by a livable environment. We create community through people, parks, and programs. This is who you are, this is your values, this is your mission. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen the research on Good to Great, but that was a significant 6-year study of what makes organizations great. And a lot of the people that were asking questions about Good to Great research were from the nonprofit sector, from the government sector, what Jim Collins calls the social sectors. And he made one very important point in his monograph to help people understand how his research would fit into the social sectors. Why business thinking is not the answer is a very important point to make when we deal with governmental operations or churches or nonprofits. The thing I want to make sure that you hear very clearly is the statement that he makes at the last point. For a business, financial returns are a perfectly legitimate measure of performance. For a social service sector organization, however, performance must be measured relative to its mission, not its financial success. That is not the way a lot of the people are looking at government services today, but I think it's important that this Good to Great research places the social sector on that kind of a path. Now, when Ken and Eric met with the group, I guess the study group, we talked about a number of what we are calling tenets. And here are some of the ones that we have listed. Primarily for Edina residents, schools, churches, and businesses. Focus on the health and wellness and the sense of community benefits that recreation facilities provide. Provide close to home, prime time indoor recreational opportunities, allowing for educational study time. Improve the recreational program opportunities that utilize indoor facilities. And be available to non-resident groups in order to reduce the financial obligations of Edina participants and taxpayers. And finally, to be sensitive to the parents' willingness to pay for their child's participation for the sport of choice. Because if more hours are available for these kids to play, it may create some additional cost to the participant. The two places where I want to really focus in on most, the sports dome should be primarily for Edina residents, schools, churches, and businesses. In your comp plan, it clearly states, provide recreational opportunities that are accessible and affordable to primarily, but not exclusively, Edina residents, and yet remain competitively priced in the Twin Cities. So when we went through this study, we tried to keep these tenets as major factors in how we were going to present this feasibility study to you. The second thing is a little bit more difficult to maybe understand, but we believe that a sports dome budget should include a renewal and replacement line item. I know right now that you have a depreciation expense, but this is our position. Based on what you said in your comp plan, which is provide fee-based revenue generating recreation enterprise facilities, we do not believe that there is any way that you can cover the initial cost of construction of this facility. It's not doable. But we do believe that you can expect to have a replacement and renewal line which takes care of financing the replacement of a dome and the turf, which are the two major costs that this facility would generate. We then went on to an architectural program.
Well, obviously, we had to develop a pro forma around not only the tenants, but what type of a structure, and that was one of our tasks. After we did our analysis, we felt that what you're really looking at is a seasonal dome, a 6-month operation, basically 24 to 26 weeks. We actually developed a pro forma on a 25-week schedule. So one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that it had a full-size soccer field in it. So in case there are games, although that won't be the primary use, it's going to be mostly for camps and so forth. And I would have 2 overlay soccer fields on it, the smaller running width-wise. Lacrosse would be an overlay, as well as 2 softball, baseball fields. And on one end, we would have 3 hitting pitching tunnels for the baseball aspects. One of the things we struggled with was a walking and jogging trail. I think that is something that you would want to consider if you move ahead with this project. We have not found that those are revenue producing. But if you remember some of your tenants and how you want to provide recreational facilities, it is something that you would want to certainly consider. And obviously, you need the support elements of restrooms for it, as well as parking to accommodate the use of the dome and the turnover. Just roughly speaking, we look at that between $5 and $5.5 million. Now, in your appendix, we gave you a much more detailed listing of what that dollar amount would include. Again, the caveat, however, is that this is sort of a universal cost without a specific site in mind, and therein lies potentially some danger, not knowing what soil conditions are going to be, and as you know, what is the run of the sewer line and those types of elements. But at least you have, I think, a pretty good figure, whether you like it or not, at about $5 to $5.5 million. One of the other things we did is, with a 25-week season, we calculated that there are 1,300 prime time hours. And again, we're assuming from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock on the weekdays, and on weekends, essentially from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. That gives you about 53 hours a week. And for 25 weeks, roughly 1,300 hours. We discounted the concept because you're probably not going to be open on Christmas Day and some of the holidays, so it gets it down to a more manageable number. And again, this is more of a, it's not a critical number, it's more of a benchmark number for you to work with, and so you can start to assess how your rentals are going if you move again ahead in the future. We obviously did not look at based on our conversations with the user groups, there really was no demand or interest in going anything beyond the 25 or 26-week season. So essentially 1,300 prime time full dome hours or 2,600 field hours. So I want to make sure you understand full dome means both fields, and that's where you adjust our rate out, or a field hour. One of the next things is what we did is after looking at the request from all of the organizations, and I think if you look at the report, you'll notice that we came up with a number there. One of the things about that number is that while it's a total request, it'd be very easy to say, well, this is what they want, let's multiply that out times the rate schedule, and this is what you can expect for a revenue source. Clearly, that's not the way we took an approach here, because we know that organizations all want sometimes the same hours, and that clearly happened, and again, we pointed that out in the report, We have some weekdays and some weeks in which there is a demand for 35 weekday hours. You can't fill that. You only have 25. So there's 10 hours that essentially have to go someplace else. Can the organizations put them on Saturday to Sundays? We don't know. So there's some shrinkage in time. And there's some also shrinkage on the calendar. Sometimes you come up with a holiday or spring break where nobody really wants that time, or Super Bowl Sundays. You ever try to rent a facility on Super Bowl Sunday after 3 o'clock? Not too many organizations really want that time. So there is some shrinkage. And so what we have projected for you here, as we move ahead, Harvey, the next slide is, we think that at a minimum, your Edina organizations would take 820 hours. That's a minimum. I would not be surprised that if you sat down with these same groups and you actually had a schedule in front of you, that number would increase. I would think that. But what we wanted to do here is give you a floor, a bottom floor, at which you could probably and likely build up. Now, how much more would that build up beyond the 820? Not a lot, but some. Okay. Our rate schedule, we are suggesting that you would do $350 an hour for your prime time, and $320 per hour for the shoulder season. And again, if you read the report, I'm sure you saw that what we were seeing in other domes is the time period from when you open in late October to the end of this year is really a very weak season. And historically, as you look at some of the other facilities in the metropolitan area, it's an increasing percentage of usage every month until you get to March. So October starts out kind of low, it keeps building and building until you get into the other season. So we really kind of tagged that as a shoulder season. So when I refer to that, it's really that time period of the year. And of course, if you look, again, you look at the number, the sold, it's hard to say that a couple of times in a row. It's borne out by the fact that your own organizations only want collectively 215 hours during that time period, which represents only 40% of the hours, okay? So, again, the majority of the time that people want are in the spring. Baseball gears up. They're looking for more indoor time, softball, the other sports, and obviously getting ready for the outdoor season.
We can go through the pro forma at any time you want, but I think what we wanted to point out with this particular slide is the expenditures, the 4 largest expenditures that you're going to have if this project goes forward. First of all, number 1, utility services. I just talked to Maple Grove today, and they were very pleased with the numbers that they got in November and December, but as you know, this has been a very warm year. But it looks like it's going to be right around $103,000. Personal services, $55,000. That's to staff, to have supervisor staff the one person or the one position for every hour that the facility is open. The setup and takedown of the facility is around $35,000. You should note that in the first time this project would be built, the setup is part of the construction costs, but it's going to be $35,000 a year to put up and take down each year. And then the most important number of all, and that is the renewal and replacement number of $124,000. And the way we did this was we found out what the price of the dome was and of the turf, and then we increased it by 3% a year for the 10 years for the turf and 20 years for the dome. And it came out to $124,000 for the first 10 years, and then in year 11 it goes to $145,000 or $146,000. But that will give you, in those at 10 years and 20 years, a replacement, a brand new replacement for the facility major structure.
Let's take, if you would like to, you might want to look on page 15 of that report, because I'm going to refer to it just a couple of times. Based on the 280-hour minimum, 820-hour minimum and the rate structure that we suggested, we see the Edina organization capturing about $280,000 worth of generating that much revenue. We also think that your Parks and Recreation Department, after talking to staff, that they can generate an additional $5,000 in non-peak times. In other words, daytime hours through some creative program and some opportunities, whether they be events, a special feature, or long-term program. Now, that's going to take a while to gear up over the years, and I do think that in future years that number can grow. I do think there are some opportunities there. But initially, it's not a big number, but it is a number. And then vending, an additional $1,000. So you're going to come up with, we project, $286,000 during that initial year. Against total operating expenses of $234 for a net operating income of around $52,000. Well, that looks good, but again, now we need to take that to renewal and replacement number of $124,000, or a net loss on the entire operation of roughly $71,000. Now again, we're talking just Edina organizations. There's still ample hours to go out if you want to rely on non-Edina groups to come in and rent that. That number represents somewhere between 220 and 260 hours that you would have to sell. That's full dome hours to generate enough money for that number to disappear and go back down to zero. And that's the challenge for you, okay? I challenged the study committee, I think when we met back in December. I suggested as a homework assignment to them that they consider at what percentage do you want to have of Edina usage for this facility before you wanted to move ahead. That percentage right now is 78%. Okay? Now, whether that's a good number or a bad number, I don't know. That's for you to decide. But that's about what it's at. Again, I do think that 820 is likely to go up some once you sit down. That number might increase, but not substantially. So your challenge is, again, if you want to move ahead and you want to break even, if that's your goal, if that's your mission, then you need to look at some of these outside groups as coming in. There are some risks with this, even if you do move ahead. And we want to make sure we point that out to you. There are some risks. First of all, a high energy cost. Right now we are the lowest cost for natural gas in the last 10 years. Now we took that into consideration, so our number in there actually is higher. You could probably do a little bit better, but we didn't want to use the lowest possible number for that. That just didn't seem right and didn't follow our own tenet of being conservative. So that's actually up a little bit. But we do know that if we go back to what happened in 2007 and 2008, and if you look at your own energy costs for your facilities, you know how quickly those escalated. So that is a concern because, again, you're operating at about 35 to 40-some% of your costs are energy related. So you need to be concerned about that. Obviously, competition. Even though your organizations and the need to get some outside groups, you need to worry about the potential of other domes or other facilities. And it's just not domes. We've got a private facility in Eden Prairie that, and Harvey has talked to these gentlemen, is clearly underway and is set to open. Might there be more? Now, while we've checked with St. Louis Park and Bloomington, they don't have anything on their drawing boards, but it doesn't take much for something to pop up and be a competition.
Let me take the third one. I wanted to make sure, this was not in our original report, but I think it's important for you to know this, and that is honoring of contracts. One of the things that has happened throughout the metro area is that the groups have asked for or purchased so many hours or contracted for so many hours. Many times they don't take them all. In fact, one of the cute stories that I have about Edina was when I was in Minneapolis, because it's twofold. When I was in Minneapolis, somebody dumped some hours, Minneapolis people dumped some hours in the middle of the best prime time. And so one of the council members came in and saw Edina skating on our ice. And they said, what are you doing giving away the best hours to Edina? This is a Minneapolis facility. And I said, we didn't give it, we sold it only because the Minneapolis people dropped the ice. They didn't want it. So we had to, it was either go empty or bring in Edina. And Edina was happy to come to this facility. So it's a public relations issue too. If you see somebody else skating in the best times, it might be that your people dropped some hours that they couldn't use.
And finally, your demographics. Right now, your school population is very stable, at least for the next 5 years. But the fuel that feeds these youth organizations are the students that are going through the school halls. So if you start to lose student population and the groups and the athletic associations numbers start to drop, you can bet that the hours that the Edina organizations will need is also going to drop, and a greater reliance then, obviously, on non-Edina market group will have to prevail. So those are just some of the risks that you need to take a look at.
Recommendations. We believe it's in your best interest that if this project is to proceed forward, that you ask your staff to meet with the groups, the Edina groups, to make sure that when you go through a schedule that there's 820 hours that they want to purchase. It may be more, and that would be great. But I think that's essential to find out what kind of a commitment you're going to have once they go through the times, because everybody's going to want the same prime time hours. I was just checking with some other folks. Wednesdays is usually religious education day. Now, apparently it's sometimes Tuesday or Wednesday, so a Tuesday or Thursday. So in Maple Grove, they didn't, I just checked for February, they only sold 3 out of the 5 hours on Wednesday night 3 weeks in a row. So there is definitely that issue that you need to be aware of. And so you need to find out for sure what hours are they willing to take. And then once you do that, then your staff should meet with Nevers Baseball and Simon Soccer and others to find out how many of the 220 to 250, 60 hours that they are interested in. And what it may mean then is that Edina groups may have to say, you know, we need these people in here, and we may have to give them some of our choice hours in order to break even on this facility. So those are things that we think are really important if you're going to go forward with this, is to sit them all down in a room, first the Edina groups, so they can see how it's going to play out in terms of what hours each of them need. We got involved in a mess in a city which I won't mention the name of because the contracts weren't written very well, and everybody wanted the same hours, and it was leading to the city council saying we ought to sue these guys for not meeting their contract. And I looked at the contracts, and they couldn't have won because the contracts were written very poorly. We think you should have a business plan strategy for development of programs and services. Right now, we know that in Plymouth, they're generating $40,000 from park and recreation programs, primarily adult soccer leagues. And they're taking some 10 and 11 o'clock times, which would help. And then they also have, they've been playing around with and being fairly successful with open times, where they charge $5 a person. And in Maple Grove, some of these are coming in at 3:30 to 5:30, which is also to your benefit because it's not 5 to 10, which is the key prime time hours. And then I think you have to have a strategy for developing of a strong relationship with these non-resident groups. You can't take them for granted. The Edina folks can't make it break even, and so you're going to have to rely on a good relationship with the non-resident groups that you finally attract to your facility. And then an annual review and adjustment of dome rates. Incremental pricing is key. You can't take, as some have tried to do, and say, we're going to keep it flat for 5 years, and all of a sudden we're going to give them a $15 an hour boost. It's sticker shock. So you're going to have to look at the marketplace. You're going to have to look at your expenditures, and then you're going to have to decide, maybe we're going to charge $2 or $4 or $5 more for a field hour so that we can make sure that we break even. Well, I threw this in at the last. I think that what we're worried about most is when you replace the turf after 10 years, the replacement fund goes from 124 to 145. So that's going to be extra hours that you're going to have to sell, or you're going to have to increase the prime time rental rate beyond the 2% that we've recommended for this facility. So that's, in a nutshell, what we said in the report. We hope we made it short enough so that you could ask the questions that you need to ask of us.
Questions? Why don't we start on one end? I think there's going to be a lot of questions and work our way down here. Susan, do you have any?
I have a couple questions. First, is it an assumption if you build the new sports dome that it's a turf field that you can use in the summer as well when you've taken down the building? So if we would add on in a new field area, we have one net new field in the summer. So that's the case?
That's correct. The turf would be certainly usable in the summertime. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Next question is around the size of, you said it's for one large overlaid field with two smaller divisions. Did you kind of play with that proposition of what about one big field plus one small with the overlap of people wanting the same hours, and how did you net out at that one big field?
Good question, and I probably should have touched upon that. We did look at what would be the three small field option, which would be more the size that Shakopee is looking at or Vadnais Heights. The problem is, Savage, excuse me, the problem is that you still don't have enough usage hours to really make full use of that. Remember, your 40% usage would actually drop in the fall. That's 100% met right now. So you would have most field that would be standing empty during October, November, December, that you'd have to also sell more hours to the outside group. The increased revenues that you would get amounts to only about $13,000 if you had another field, okay? Because it's, again, it's just during that time period, January, February, March, okay? So now you've increased your revenues by $13,000, and while that's a good number, your numbers for the turf replacement and the dome replacement, they're going to go up. And so we're going to eat into that $13,000. Your construction costs are going to go up as well. Okay, so that's why we stuck with this two-field scenario.
Okay. And then one final question around, is there an additional cost from what you've shown for if there's a walking track around the side, or is what you've proposed something that how much would that cost to be an extra?
No, it would not. There is obviously an increased cost simply because the facility is a little larger.
Yeah.
But we didn't calculate out if we reduced it.
Is
There
it
will
just
be some savings if you don't have a walking track.
It's very small incremental.
Sure. Okay. That's all my questions. Thanks.
So in our study before we met you, we were looking at the total needs of the community for fields and other things. And one thing we found was that we really could use additional soccer fields. There's a definite need in our town for that. And so I'm just wondering if you could, you know, you're saying $5 million for the everything, but I'm just wondering if you could, you know, I was looking at a study done through the school district in 2010 that had doming Coleman at $1.6 million. So I'm just, you know, to me, the difference between 1.6 and 5 million is what I would have expected to be more than, you know, than what I would think turf field costs. So I'm wondering if you could respond to
Why the difference in cost?
Yes.
I can't, because I don't know how they got their number. I don't know how they got their number, so I have no means to do a comparison.
Did they do grading? Did they consider grading?
Well, the field's already there.
Well,
Yeah. Well, then you've taken out the cost of turf.
Okay. So if this, I'm just wondering, what is the if the city put in a turf field, what's the incremental cost for doming that?
You know, Ellen, I think that's really a question that we should probably defer to somebody else, that are the engineers. Again, it could be a big range, because until you have a site, till you know what the soil conditions are like, till you know what has to be brought into the site, it's just really not a very good idea that I would give you that number. I think that's a number that somebody else should give you.
Okay. And can you give us any estimates on the impact of the new facility in Eden Prairie? Do you have any idea? Is that going to affect our own our soccer clubs that are saying that they're going to buy time from us? Well, that facility is just on the other side of 169, I understand. So do you have any idea what the impact would be?
I think you're going to have to ask the Edina Soccer Club that question. And I think one of the ways you get to that is going through this process of asking what hours that they're willing to purchase. They may not get the kind of hours they need or want, and so they may end up looking elsewhere to get the hours to satisfy their parents and their kids. It's not an easy question to answer.
And then another question about that is that I know that the soccer association's talking with the baseball association. Now that the studies come out, they're trying to figure out, well, let's try to make it work. Mm-hmm. And they were wondering if they committed to shoulder time, if they could sell it. So, you know, would you be recommending that that would be something that, as they talk to staff in that first recommendation, is that something that we should be allowing?
Well, having them sell those hours, well, the question is, if they don't, they always come back to the city. They'll eventually, as Harvey said, they'll dump them back on you. Yeah. Until they're willing to sign a mortgage on their house and turn it over to you, you really don't have anything that binds them to that over an extended period of time other than honor and trust. Okay? And what happens with organizations is that leadership changes. In soccer clubs and in baseball organizations, the presidency changes, and all of a sudden that commitment that was made to a council at one time is no longer important to them anymore. What's more important is something else. So that's just the nature of the beast. It's not a criticism of anybody in the dining. That's just the nature. But clearly, if you want to make this thing happen, if those groups want to still kind of make this thing happen, what they need to work on is getting people into this dome in October, November, December. Don't worry so much about the hours in January, February, and March. You need to get more time sold in October, November, and December. Those are the hours that need to get pumped up. And it's sold. I shouldn't say pumped up, because that's an illusion. You need to have those hours sold. Those are the key ones. Because generally speaking, you'll be able to sell some of those February, March hours to some other groups that are all of a sudden out there who they'll pick up an hour here or an hour there. You're not going to sell a bunch of hours. You need to sell a bunch, a big bunch, during that time period to make this thing happen.
Okay. And in your experience in other communities, I don't know if you looked into this, but someone mentioned, you know, in Edina, it is likely that parents would be willing to spend more money if they had a dome in town. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with a baseball association the size that it is, if people went out and said, you know, what's it worth to driving to Holy Angels, they'd say it's worth $20 a season, or maybe it's whatever. So I'm wondering, have you seen that work in other communities, that the user fees actually have gone up in order to support a dome?
we toyed with this particular subject because if you want the best result, you would rather have the Edina people carrying the load for you and not have to worry about non-resident groups coming in. One of the ways you could do that, we don't know of anyone that did this, but one of the ways you could look at that is to charge more for your hours, your primetime hours for Edina, and keep it lower for the non-residents because you're trying to attract them there. I think the idea of gas prices going to $4 that they're talking about, I think that's a real important question to ask, besides the energy that we save by not driving all over the Twin City metro area. I think it's something that ought to be explored, quite honestly. But if the people aren't willing to go along with it, paying higher fees, because then they're going to have to charge higher fees for participation in that particular league. So it ends up falling back on the youth participant generally.
A rule of thumb that you don't want to lose: it's more important to sell more hours than to increase the rate. Okay? You'll always generate more. If you have to have staff working on something, don't have them working on a rate schedule to increase it. Have them working on selling more time, because that's where your money is. Okay? So.
Thank you. That's all I have.
When you were talking about the shrinkage from having multiple associations that were looking at the prime hours, so do I understand you basically threw that shrinkage away? That was not counted in the numbers, correct?
That's correct.
So
Yeah, I couldn't count that.
There was no assumption in there about that some certain percentage of it might get negotiated into another time?
No. And the reason for that, it's a good question, and the reason for that is when you only have so many teams and they're already on the field on Monday and Tuesday and then Wednesday, and all of a sudden now you want them to come back and they're scheduled to be there on Saturday, does that mean they're going to have to go on Saturday twice? You see, so I couldn't do that, and I didn't want to do that. And that's why I felt, let's pick this bottom number at 820, and if the organizations think that they still can switch groups and put more time on Saturday, remember, they've already got time on Saturday. You know, are they going to have a two-a-day for some of those kids? Probably not.
Right, but in a broad association, you have different age groups, and there might be the capability to do something like that.
Right.
What about adult groups? Was that addressed at all in terms of reaching out to any adult groups?
You know, we did talk to, we tried to talk to some of the adult groups, adult softball, for example. Not interested. They've already got a good deal going over in Richfield. So that wasn't going to happen here unless you want to give the dome away. But I do think there are opportunities to start some programs, as we were referring to earlier. There's some opportunities there. You'll have some hours. It's clear that you can probably do that. But again, it's going to take time to grow and develop those programs. Now, in our management model, you know, we tried to, as you saw, we're taking 25% of your ice arena manager. That individual's not going to have an awful lot of time to start to develop those programs. So if you want to do that, if that's going to be an objective, we're probably going to have to try to figure out a little bit different staffing model to make that happen. Okay?
But I did talk to your other staff, your other recreation programming staff, and they all said they would be trying to find new ways to use the dome. So they are at least on board as a team to try to get this number up. And they're a creative bunch. They're very, very good people that you have on your staff.
Then my last question has to do with the school district. Was there any inclusion of school district hours in this Edina turf rental?
Yeah, the high school, which was really committed to a sort of a dollar amount, which translated into hours. I made that conversion. Yes, that's part of that 820, so they're in there. Okay. They're also part of the shrinkage, though, too, because as you saw, they were also looking for times that would go into 6 o'clock, which is the same times, so there's an overlap with the high school as well. So.
In the interest of time here, I'll just ask one question, and maybe you'll have some insight. It seems to me we've approached it to, here's what the design of the dome is going to be like, and is it financially feasible? Can we flip that around and say, wait, what's realistically financially feasible? Because it frightens me with the competition and with the people not honoring contracts, what that does and what that may put the city in a situation we don't want to be in. Just throwing this out here, and I know it's a dome, but is there other options to say, can we build this in phases and see what works? Can we, I know that in a tennis facility there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 domes, and maybe one's available certain times a year and 2 and 3 otherwise. The shoulder season concerns me, and maybe we could have a situation where somehow we can manage that, where there's so many less hours that are going to be in demand. We don't have the full facility operational somehow, and I don't know if that's a design issue or not, but just to throw that out for you.
You had a couple of questions there, and the first part of that question was about, can you build it in phases? Is that correct? We have with us this evening the architects from the other part of our group here, if you were to move ahead. Kathy, you want to try to answer that question? So, as long as she's here, let's put her to work.
Hi, my name's Kathy Wallace, and my
Address,
address
please.
is...
Name and address.
Yes. Address is 1282 Stanford Avenue, St. Paul. To address the question of building the dome in phases, there are a number of pieces that have to be done pretty much at the same time as you're building the turf field. A dome is anchored and held down, since you've got the balloon effect holding up. It's anchored by a concrete grade beam or some other concrete foundation that goes all the way around it. It would be very challenging, given the way that's done and given the way a turf field is drained, to change the size of the footprint of the dome at some later point. You would tear a lot up in order to put it down. And I think the other thing we've seen is that there's enough interest in both the full field and the two smaller fields that's kind of the increment. That starting with a full soccer field is really the base increment, and then you go up in size from there. So just to answer your question, I would say that phasing would be very challenging for the inflated part of the dome. Some of the other stuff, maybe the parking, or if you were going to have an accessory building, it might be possible to phase those items.
Is it at all feasible to have 2 equisized domes and have one available 6 months, the 26 weeks, 25 weeks, and another one started 12 weeks later?
Would you want them, would those domes be merged? Would you have the space? Would you want the space to be open inside?
Yeah. That's an architectural question, I guess, I'm not sure.
It's probably a dome technology question, which in some ways goes beyond architecture. Domes do. I don't think you can then have that. You could have 1 dome or 2 domes, and yes, you could have one open the whole time and one open up, but I don't think you could ever merge those two to have a single field supported by 1 dome.
Wait, sit down. When I hear the space needed around it, could you tell me, for this field that we're talking about, what's the footprint that we need?
It really depends on what your groups ask for. So the width of a soccer field, as you probably know, can vary. A typical good-sized dome is going to be 220 feet wide and somewhere between 360 and 400 feet long. I'm sorry, am I answering your question?
Yeah, but what, in addition to that, for purposes of a dome, if we were going to put in a turf field, we would put a turf field in the size of a, of a soccer field, maybe a little wider, but now, if we are thinking that 5 years down the road, we want to leave it open to have a dome.
You need about 10 feet, somewhere between 6 and 10 feet on either side, just to allow for the cutoff of that dome sloping down to zero or to, depending where your curb is. In addition, you are typically required to have a 10 to 15 foot, maybe sometimes 20 feet fire route all around the entire dome. Sometimes it can be on 3 sides or fewer, but that does mean you need to add another basically 40 feet both directions.
We got a few emails, and one of the emails said that I think the gist of it was that we were overcomplicating things, and that it doesn't need to be an enterprise. It's just as simple as blowing it up and taking it down. Is that an oversimplification here? It certainly seemed to be. Are there any cities that have domes that, I guess you don't know what the cost, we were asking, Coleman has 1.6 million. When I saw there's a picture of the Minnetonka field, and that looked like it was over an existing field. It looked like a football field, and they built it. It goes over the normal football stadium. Okay. So we don't have any idea what it would cost to retrofit.
Kathy was involved in the Maple Grove one, which is...
We actually were the architect for the Minnetonka field. They did the dome at the same time as they turfed their football field, and so it was a complete they completely stripped everything inside the track. They even had to cut the track to allow the ductwork from the mechanical units to go onto the track and into the dome. So that was done not as a retrofit as much as a complete redo of the field.
Do you know what that cost?
I don't remember. It's smaller than the footprint of that because it's inside. A track is smaller, and it wouldn't allow for 2 youth. I don't think it would allow for 2 full youth soccer fields. The cost was less than the $5 million, but it was substantial. It was more than 1.6.
I had another question. The dome at Eden Prairie, it couldn't be any closer to Edina without being in Edina. Have you ever seen a scenario where you have a facility like that, and then if we built something somewhere on Braemar land that you've got 2 competing facilities that are a quarter of a mile of one another? I mean, have you ever seen anything like that before? I mean, is there a scenario where we could actually see downward pricing pressure on the hours?
Well, to clarify, it's not a dome.
It's pretty big. I mean, it's almost as big as what we're talking about. It's 95 yards long, where we're talking 133. It's 65 yards wide, where we're looking at 76. I mean, it's not small. It's big.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think you can expect that to happen. Look what's happening to the golf industry right now. Look what's happening to the ice arena industry right now. You probably don't see it so much here in Edina in terms of ice arenas, but if you start getting out to some of the 2nd and 3rd tier suburbs, you're seeing cutthroats on the ice schedule, particularly in the shoulder season. Again, that's where the cutthroat happens. Everybody wants ice time in December, January. It doesn't take much to sell that ice. But you want to try and sell ice time in late September or into late March after the state high school hockey tournament. It's cutthroat.
First, I want to thank you guys. It's a nice piece of work that you've done, and I'm picky about this kind of stuff. I teach some of this, so it's a nice set. I want to do a little on the financial side of things. So I want to be clear and make sure everybody's clear on this. This is an operating income statement, essentially, operating pro forma. There is no payback of the initial $5 million. So, on top of the cost that you've got in here, if it's a $5 million bond issue over 20 years, there's $250,000 a year in principal going on, and there's no interest in here either. So there's another $100,500 essentially of interest payments. So if we talk about a cash flow scenario, on top of what you're showing here, there's another $300,000 to $400,000 of cash outflow that the city will have to deal with, because It's not coming from the dome in any way, shape, or form.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. Just want to be very, so everybody knows and when we're clear on that. I like the conservative numbers. I like what you've done. If you were looking at this best guess, do we get 85% recovery?
In year one?
On average, over a 10-year average.
Yeah, you might be able to do that by year 3.
But that's purely on operating costs. Again, that's not interest or anything else.
That is correct.
And that's, so we aren't fully covering the sinking fund. We get about 85% of the.
I think that could happen.
Okay, of the costs you're laying out.
Yeah, strictly Edina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really, that's, you didn't quantify on the Golf Dome impact. Is it significant, I mean, in your estimation, is it significant? Is this, within the broader scope of things, is this something that should be, well, actually, we don't have a golf dome right now, right?
We dropped that slide tonight. We didn't want to bring it up.
Put it in
But,
flames,
yeah,
but anyway,
well,
yes.
clearly, any of the revenues that golf dome had achieved during the months of October, November, and December would evaporate.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, you'd want to say, we will not rent that out for any purpose. In a sense, forcing people to use this dome, okay?
So there's a substitution effect to the tune of
Bingo.
$15,000, $20,000.
I think we said 10,000
Yeah, okay.
in the report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
This may be kind of a silly question, but we're talking about the difficulty of renting the shoulder time. Is there, if you would then determine that you'd only inflate your dome starting in December, so you're only up during the prime season, do you lose so much money in the time you could otherwise rent during the shoulder time that it makes it economically unfeasible to make that choice? Or is it just kind of silly to build a dome when you're only going to be using it for 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a tough question, because part of the problem is putting up a dome in the middle of the winter. That becomes something of an issue, and I would beg off on that $35,000 figure. I don't think you're going to get it done in December for $35,000. And one of the reasons that's happening right now with that number is that the area domes have kind of gotten together, and the outfit kind of goes from one place to another place and puts them all up, and there's some efficiency for them to do that. Now you'd be the lone wolf out here, and you'd have to bring in these people at another time and another place and another equipment setup, so that fee would go up. I guess we would really have to take another hard look at that. We don't have a clear answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me that on a go-forward basis, what we're trying to do tonight is to decide whether or not to go forward with a second consulting report, or should we hold off? And I think the wisdom that you gave us is great, that we really need to assess what Edina usage is going to be in a kind of a businessy plan. I mean, and project it out. And I really don't have any idea what the demographics will bear out 10 years from now or 15 years from now in terms of kids needing to use the dome. So I think we're there. I think that we do need to do some homework before we could go ahead and do another report. So I'd like to hear what Dan has to say, but I think we're there.
Very well written, logical report. Congratulations and thank you. The other domes you mentioned, the only one I could figure out that's a school district one was Osseo Maple Grove. All the rest are municipal. Is that right?
Maple Grove is a city.
Oh, okay.
But the school district has a major say in that. Wayzata does too, and to a certain extent, the Irish Dome does because it's on school district property. But that thing has kind of changed over the years.
And they're all inflatable domes?
Yes.
Does anybody build a permanent one and over 20 years save money on energy?
Well, we're going to find out. Woodbury just announced that they're going to build a $15.5 million dome. I mean, not dome, but a permanent building, air-conditioned in the summer, heated in the winter. And Vadnais Heights, yes, Vadnais Heights has a full dome that is operating in the summer, and it's air-conditioned. And we're going to wait to see what kind of costs are going to be involved in that. But I think they're looking at geothermal in the Woodbury situation, because it'll be a permanent facility.
Excuse me. Ken, I think it was you who said in 5 years there's enough kids coming through the school district where everything will be peachy. At the end of, in the 6th year, the district is predicting less students. Is that right?
Their projections are just 5 years,
Oh,
so that's
okay.
all we
So
had
we
to
don't
work
know,
with.
okay.
Yeah, that's all we had to work with was the 5 years. You know, we also looked at some of the private schools and the enrollments there, and unfortunately, there's always looking into the future by using past projections. It's sort of like driving forward by looking in the rearview mirror. It's a little risky. But clearly, you know, you have been stable over the last several years, and the next 5 years look to be stable. You know, I have no reason to suggest that it's going to make a terrible nosedive downward. I think you're going to be stable. I mean, Edina's got certain qualities and an air about them that you should always be able to have a stable population. It sure would have been nice if we could have come in here and said your population is going like this in the school district. It would have made these numbers a lot easier and your decision-making a lot easier, but that's not the case.
But do remember that you are one of the highest rated quality of life indexes, and it's because Edina is a place you want to live.
Mm-hmm. The material for the dome, has that gotten better over the years than the golf dome that just burned, where it's fire retardant? Do people put sprinklers in them? I'm thinking not only about the expense, but I'm thinking about the safety of the users.
I'm not aware of any facility that does have sprinklers, but I know it's been studied because there's always discussion when you're looking at a dome. What if we made it a 7-month dome or an 8-month, and at that point it falls under a different code. It becomes a building rather than something that's regulated by the fire code. So there has been discussion of something like a water cannon, but there's no way to suspend sprinklers from the air-supported cable structure.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions? All right, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for allowing us to serve you in this way. We feel passionate about Parks and Recreation, but we want to make sure you get as accurate of numbers as you possibly can so you can make a good, solid decision. And so I hope we accomplish that with you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. At this point, if there's any members of the public that would like to come up and speak, would like to do that. I'd like to remind you to state your name, your address, and there's a monitoring system right here to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
My name is Paige Rickert. I live at 5304 Forestland Boulevard. And part of my concern is making these sweeping assumptions that we've exhausted who we've evaluated. And I really look at 3 groups: soccer, lacrosse, and baseball. The school district was a minor player at best in this analysis, and primarily because they're not set up to accommodate dome use hours through the registration fees. I'd like to propose that a work group comprised of the youth association members, the high school coaches, both male and female, or boys and girls, and some private citizens be a part of the task force to help you ferret out how many numbers are really in demand. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff May with the Edina Baseball Association. My address is 5724 Dale Avenue. We have gone through the numbers and the hours committed multiple times, so we stand firmly behind the hours submitted. We would also suggest that many of the shoulder hours that were excluded from the study would be negotiated back into usable and rented hours. Also, the population of organizations is limited to 4. Certainly, we would be able to rent many more hours than that. But we do appreciate the conservative approach that the consultants have taken on the study. One of the other questions that we would raise is the assumption that the entire facility would be roughly $5 million. That's a reasonable assumption if every possible location would be a similar cost. One of the members raised the question about Kuhlman. Obviously, with very significant differences in cost, that's an option that's worth considering, because it would be a shame to have to exclude options with such varying differences in cost if that could make the difference between what's feasible and what's not feasible.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Meyer, 5708 Abbott Avenue, Edina. I wasn't planning on speaking, but after their presentation, I've, for the last few years, had MacGyver flag football games together for youth football. For an hour on Wednesdays, we drive up to Maple Grove to play football there. So we're taking with Osseo. So we're going up an hour round trip just so football players can play some football. So I just wanted to comment on that. And then on the shoulder hours, I would want you to look at, in October, 2 years ago, we ran into the rainiest season, and we had, I think, around 45% of our games canceled that we couldn't redo. So looking at the shoulder hours in October, even extending into November, we could extend the football season or use a lot of the shoulder hours for football because of rainouts. Van Valkenburg has clay fields, so they rain out and they get closed down sooner than anything else. Braemar, with the frost that we ran into, we couldn't play on the Braemar fields because we didn't want to spend $100,000 fixing them for baseball in the spring. So I just wanted to let you know that there are hours out there and there are groups out there that will use this dome, because I'm having to play flag football in the Braemar Golf Dome that we can't play in anymore. So now we're back at the field house where kids can slip and break their arms like my son did last winter. And we're driving up to Maple Grove to play football. And I just don't think that that's right in a city like Edina, and we should take pride in our facilities overall on the theme of the night. And I really think that we can make it work. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Carter Freeman. I live at 6144 Arctic Way. I'm the head coach of the Edina High School baseball team, and I'm also the assistant coach on the Legion baseball team, which falls under the EBA. And I think one thing that maybe has not been addressed is once a dome is in place and these programs begin using it, that the programs get built out. I can think of some examples. Building a coach academy that we currently aren't even doing. Building off-season leagues that we're not doing. So I'd just like to mention that I think the dome, the hours that have been put down at this point probably represent what is, but don't yet represent what could be. And I can tell you on the high school side of things, this is my first year as the coach, and we are at a huge disadvantage to other communities. We're not allowed on the baseball fields in the city until April 15th. Our first game was against the defending state champions on April 12th at Braemar. That game is no longer. We have to get ready for the season on a gym floor, or we have to get ready for a season on an outside turf football field. And the weather, of course, is always a question mark that time of year. I like Paige Rickert's idea of getting a task force together made up of the different organizations and associations where we could make sure we get those shoulder hours covered, because I think we can. And I would just ask that we have that opportunity to sharpen our pencils that much more. I know this has been something that's been looked at for many, many years, and I believe it's time for Edina. If we are a city that values excellence, then I think we need this dome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing nobody else step up, anybody have any, should we start a discussion here? Why don't my thoughts are, I mean, it is clear there is a need for multi-purpose athletic fields year-round. I mean, how many times have we heard stories of there being inadequate resources for all these organizations? It is important to adapt and offer amenities, in my opinion, for the next generation of resident. I find it a little bit frustrating that you hear that other domes are built with support from school districts, and we're not seeing much of that at this point. I don't mean to pick on you, Kathy. It's your first meeting. I don't, is there, maybe I should ask the consultants this, is there more evaluation that needs to be done of these organizations to sharpen the pencil, to fine-tune these hours? Is there something that we miss? May I ask you that question? Did you talk to the school organizations, the school athletic organizations? And
we talked to community ed as well. I think our recommendations speak for itself. We think that if you're going to go forward, you ought to have a meeting with your staff and all these Edina groups to see how many hours can be sold from their perspective. And then after that has been determined, you go to those non-Edina groups and find out what they're willing to buy. And then there's going to probably have to be some adjustments, as I indicated in the recommendations. We indicated in the recommendations that Edina might have to give up some choice prime time to get some non-resident to come in and use some of the shoulder or some of the other lesser quality prime time hours.
Joseph?
Yeah, thank you.
Unfortunately, Todd Fronick, who is the head of the committee that was working on this and looking at it, is rolled off the board, so he's not here to report. But the committee did decide to go ahead with the recommendations by the consultants, and that is what we would recommend to the park board, is to move forward with the recommendations that are on page 20.
The recommendations of that group seem to kind of differ a little bit from the recommendations of staff, which kind of felt like an either-or. Did anybody else feel that way? Where we either move forward or we, and I kind of agree with Louise and that it definitely deserves to be studied a little bit further.
Yeah, well, and it can be done different. We could do it similar. We could create a working group. I mean, I don't know if that's what Louise was implying, but certainly these recommendations are talking about trying to flush out the hours that could be committed to, and what we're hearing is that that's something that the athletic associations want to do too. So I don't see that there's much of a conflict. It's just in how it's it's the process that it's handled in, whether or not it's going to go through a committee or working group or it be staff centered.
I get these terms sometimes mixed up, but a working group would consist of a park board member and other non-park board members.
Right.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And that's what I would recommend and suggest, along with someone from the school board or school district, to study usage and hours and demand.
I think one of the only other recommendations that the sub-team added to the list were that we wanted to really explore with the users, are there any other amenities that you guys want in addition that would make you use more hours, that would make you want to come to our dome versus someone else's dome, that would want other users to come to our dome. So exploring, wireless or a Starbucks or, just whatever other amenities would make you want to use it more.
There's another question. If we're going to continue on with the study, there's another piece of this, because having been on the committee, the scope that we addressed initially was simply the dome and the financial feasibility of the dome. If we're going forward on this, we are short on fields, and for $5 million of capital outlay for a domed field, that's probably 3 turfed fields, non-domed turf fields, that are available about 9 months, for about 9 months of use a year, or 8, wherever we want to draw it. Okay, that we have limited resources. We have limited ability to fund these kinds of things, which provides greater utility for the community. One field domed, or an alternative being, say, you take something like Pamela and you put in 2 or 3 more turf fields. And I think if we're going to move forward on this, that has to be part of the discussion, because I think it's a very important consideration. We are extremely short during football season, during the outdoor season, we are extremely short of fields. One field isn't going to do it. Okay? One field relieves a little bit of it, but we've got people playing. I mean, when you really look at it, we've got kids playing on fields that just aren't appropriate in a lot of ways for the play. We are short on athletic fields. And one domed field may make everybody happy between October and March. It does not solve the problems the rest of the year. And so I think we have to consider, if we're going to go forward, as we talk about feasibility and we're talking about trade-offs, I think that has to be part of the conversation, or at least I'd recommend that be part of the conversation.
Do we need to be considering about trade-offs as a parks department if we look at all the needs of the community? And we've done the needs assessment survey in 2006. We set a quality of life survey, and if you look at the top 5 items of wants, number 1 was develop walking and biking trails. Well, we just had the 9 Mile Creek thing go through last fall, so I think that was a huge move to accommodate that need. Other needs are, I think number 2 was develop a new indoor recreational center. We want everything, right? And this kind of goes back to like what I think Ellen was saying, is like trying to prioritize, can we have everything? I mean, if the community is telling us that 75% of respondents of, I think, 4,000 people said that they wanted an indoor recreational center, which is different than an indoor sports facility. You know, well, it is. I mean, recreational center is swimming and walking and, you know, exercise. It's not, this is a fee-for-use facility for baseball and lacrosse, and I think it would be helpful to know. I mean, can we have all these things? I mean, can we stagger these things to say, you know, we're studying the Grandview thing. What's gonna happen with Grandview in 2 years, 3 years? Are they going to want a recreational center there? And are they going to come back and say, no, you've got $5 million of revenue bonds on a sports dome, so we can't have that, but that's what the community wanted. You know? That seems like it should be part of this too, you know, and not just...
Joseph, I would suggest that we can put that discussion on the agenda with the city council, because I feel as if we're circling back to this same concept of, well, how should we approach these multiple needs and multiple issues, and so I would just recommend that be put on the agenda.
I would like that. I mean, I would like there to be a dome, but I just wonder, are we being the best stewards for this community 10 years down the road if that's not the greatest need?
And in the meantime, so what I would propose is that we put the bigger question, the more comprehensive needs question, on the agenda for March's meeting, and then for this matter, which is the dome, I would recommend that we go ahead with the recommendations set forth here and form a, I'm going to use the right word, working group.
I would just add, bringing up the athletic associations again and all these needs before we go to council, that we have a full picture of what all the different athletics want.
We attempted to survey them and we have that data and put it all together for us. Could you share that with the Parks Board? Not right now, I don't mean, but could you email it out to the rest of the Parks Board members? Because we do have the responses that we got from, I forget how many we looked at.
Yeah, I certainly would be more than happy to share the results of that survey. We did ask very in-depth questions about what we have, what they need, what they would like to see improved.
Great, that addresses it completely.
It sounded like you were the closest to crafting a motion.
I have to say something, though. I want to be really honest with the board. I want to make sure that if I'm proposing to have a working group, another working group for this board, that there would be sufficient supply of board members willing to be on that. The recommendation from the committee was merely that this would be a staff-run, facilitated meeting with the associations in order to flesh out these numbers. So I suppose what I'm asking is, do you all think that this ought to be a working group, or should it be more like the recommendation, which is staff-led?
John, you have a lot of things on your plate right now. Is that possible?
Well, in all the 35 years I've been here, I don't think we've ever been busier. That's not a bad thing, and that's not whining. It's just the reality of all that's on our plate. When you count up a number of working groups, a number of studies, a number of issues, it's overwhelming, quite frankly. To be positive, the first thing I want to say is thank you, gentlemen, so much. I really appreciate the professional job to give us real numbers for which to make informed decisions. They did not come to us and say, what do you want us to say? They read the numbers, the data, they did their homework, and they provided very accurate numbers without any political involvement, and I really appreciate the professional job you did. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Ann and her Sports Dome working group and the Park Board members and other volunteers have served on that. I think they did a stellar job. They've had many, many hours into this subject. As I look at it, my own bias, I think what it really comes down to, again, the question before you tonight is define feasibility. What's feasible? And that's going to come down, regardless of how many more hours you're going to ask staff and volunteers to study. And I heard the words negotiate hours, study more hours, work with the school district, try to get them to commit to more hours. At the end of the day, these are not, and your consultants have told you this, these are not hours that you can go to the bank with. Even if they sign something, an illegal contract, our consultants are telling us there could be a day they may not honor that contract, and what are you going to do about it? There's not much. So I come back, is it really good use of volunteer and staff time? I think what's before you is to wrestle with the real issue. Do you want to bite the bullet? And is this important enough for the community to have this amenity based on all of the studies that we've done to date, including the needs assessment survey that I still believe is very valid, the quality of life survey, what we've learned from that, the studies from the other enterprise facilities that have been done and is currently ongoing. I think this board has a very keen understanding of what the needs are, short-term, long-term. Granted, I will offer and volunteer. There are more detail we could certainly study and provide of what some of the greater, longer needs are that maybe aren't known right now. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to your judgment call. How important is this to have? And it's clearly they're showing you the numbers. It's not going to pay for its construction. Principal, interest, it's not there. You could even convert the money that's used for replacement costs at $124 a year. That pays for a third of what it's going to cost to build it. I think that's the core issue right there. Yeah, we could do some homework. We could probably get people to commit to more hours. We could come back to you, okay, it's 1,000 hours, but you know what, you still don't have the dollars to build it. I'd like the park board to express, how do you feel about that? Is this important enough to have in the community? There can be a lot of argument made that this is what makes Edina, Edina. Is it time to do it regardless? I think that's what the council wants to hear from you. What is your advice? What do you feel that your neighbors are telling you? For all the knowledge that you have, rather than to spin off and study this more, I think you know what the answers are going to be. You're going to be right back at the table with the same issue in front of you. How do you feel about it? And I don't mean to be to come off negative on it, but I think that's going to be the bottom line.
I think ultimately we do not have the money to build this dome, and we will have to bring it to a referendum, and the voters will ultimately decide. I think the city council was a catalyst to getting this before us today by commissioning the first study, and I do sort of agree with John. You know, we could use this amenity in our community. But that being said, it's for the residents of the city of Edina to decide whether or not they're willing to pay for it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your comments. Quick back of the napkin calculation. This thing's going to cost cash flow wise $300,000 a year. Okay, am I wrong? Am I wrong by 20%? Maybe. But I'm not wrong by much more than that. That's essentially what we're looking at is $300,000 a year out of city coffers for the sports dome. By the time you talk about payback of principal and interest, and actually that's really without a sinking fund figured in there on my calculations real quick. So if you want the sinking fund in there, that's another chunk on top. Do we need it? Would we use it? Yes. At that price, the only thing I can't answer is for $300,000 a year, how many turf fields do I get? Because that's to me the alternative. We are short on fields, and is it worth one dome for how, what's the trade-off between a dome and turfed fields so that we have better facilities for, more facilities for the rest of the year. I don't know how to get that question answered, John. Is it possible for your staff to do I'm not going to hold the numbers, but just a quick, calculation of what we're looking at in terms of costs for turf fields and where we might be able to put them? Because, things like turf fields and adding lights solve a lot of problems. And, and now granted, it doesn't get us that late fall and winter indoor, but there's a lot of domes going up around town too. So that to me is one issue. That's one issue I'd like to see a little bit before I make a final recommendation. I am fully in support of the fact that we need more athletic fields. The question is, do we need a dome or do we need turf fields? And so, the turf fields would have solved the problem. My son's one of the EFA football players. The turf fields would have solved the football problem 2 years ago that we had because they're playable during a rainy season.
I think we can come up with a fairly short order what that would cost to put artificial turf on existing fields. Right. I think that's an easy task. And I think the bigger issue, and I'm glad Kia brought this up, there are other wish lists out there. Baseball did a wonderful job coming forward with their very detailed wish list in priority. It's about $2.1 million for baseball fields alone. It's a great list at what Edina should be. And I want to hear the same thing from all of the field user sports. And I think you put all that together on the table, there's some decisions to make and priorities to make. But I think you're right on. I'd be happy to dig that information out.
Okay, I'm going to just weigh in on the other side. Because I've been listening. One of the reasons I joined the board was because I had kids in sports and because I'm a resident of Edina. And I said, well, I'm kind of tired of wandering around other communities and looking at other facilities and seeing that they have something that is well-maintained and top of the line and serves their community. And so, I'm listening and I understand we need to improve our arena. I understand we need to improve the playing fields that we have here. And I listen to the number of other communities that have domes, and I think, okay, we've paid for consultants. We've gone this far. I want to make sure that we've really done all we can in order to try to make this work. I don't want to just say, it's just the number's too big. And I actually think that there's a lot of people in Edina that if you said we might be able to build a dome, maybe we would find some private donors so that we wouldn't be talking, it's just as the Hornet's Nest people, one of the reasons that works is because they actually went out and got private donors for the capital expense on that. Well, how do I know if without a capital campaign that we might not have donors willing to put up front money to build a turf field and or put up the dome? So I would still propose that we look into this by using do a similar to the Hornet's Nest, put together a working group and try to make this happen for Edina.
Just again, I play with numbers for a living to some degree. If we rented all 1,300 hours at $350 an hour, that's a $170,000 increase over current estimation. We're still short $180,000, okay, in terms of a cash flow basis. So we can talk about the magnitude, but the bottom line is the city is going to have to, if this is going to happen, the city's going to have to commit substantial annual revenues to this dome. Now, I think we need it, or we need that or fields. Like I said, I'm still trading off those. But I don't think anybody should think otherwise. There's not a study we're going to do, You're not going to make this thing pencil out. If it penciled out, the private sector would have done it a long time ago. That's the way the world works. And so, you know, it's not going to pencil out. So it is an amenity the city is going to have to bite the bullet on and provide. And that's what we have to figure out. I think it's an amenity. I don't know whether it's a dome or fields, but I think, you know, our amenities in general, we need substantially more investment in than we are putting in currently. And so I'm in favor of doing something along these lines, but I just don't want anybody, I don't want any surprises. I don't want anybody thinking that there's any way you're going to make these numbers work. They're not going to work. It's going to cost us, you know, my guess, you know, it's $300,000 a year. That's what it's going to run. And so we need to make the decisions with our heads, you know, with our heads up and honestly facing what the numbers look like.
I'm hesitant to set up any working group until we have a discussion with the city council. I think it would be timely to talk about this at the March meeting.
Then I would suggest that we go with the recommendations of the consultants.
Actually, what I would suggest, how about 1 and 2 of the consultants' recommendations between now and the city council meeting, which is, can you guys meet with the kind of really work the pencil on the hours with the soccer clubs and the assorted other things. Look at it, get a calendar out, see how it would fill out with the key clubs that we're talking about in here, and see if there's actually interest with, you know, Simon Soccer and Evers and St. Louis. Just the first 2 recommendations. Is that feasible for the staff to take on? And you don't want to sleep, right?
Well, as staff, we're always going to be reluctant to say no. Sure, we can do that. Sure, you bet we can do that. Some other things may not get done. We're to that point, and to be quite point blank frank about it, that is on the City Council's retreat agenda coming up this weekend on Friday and Saturday. And one of the important issues is, with all boards and committees, not just Park Board, is the workload issue. We have this much staff and this much workload, and every meeting there's a new high priority, can you get it done in 4 weeks? Well, something else has to give. The Arts Center is about ready to hire a consultant to start that, and more working groups, and more, you know. We'll do our best. It wouldn't be my recommendation, but we're never going to say no. I think you're going to have to hear no from the council, not staff.
Still learning the procedures here. Would that include, David, your suggestion that we get some comparable figures on what that $5.5 million could buy in terms of other turf fields?
I'm actually more interested in that than 1 or 2. That's the one I'm more interested in than 1 and 2, because, like I said, they can come back and they can look at all of this, and they can find a way to book all 1,300 hours that the dome is up, that they've given us. You know, the shortfall's still real. It's not going away when you look at the sinking fund and everything else. So, you know, whether it's 820 or 1,000 or 1,100 makes difference at the margins, but on the larger scheme of things of, are we going to bite the bullet and commit to funding this kind of thing, it's not going to make a difference.
I need to volunteer one other thing, and I'm happy to get you the figures on the artificial turf. I need to volunteer, and everybody needs to hear this. We tried very hard through the master plan development process. It was very public, very transparent with the Pamela Park neighborhood. And we have an established master plan. And as staff, we fought really hard to get artificial turf into that complex. And we failed. As you know, artificial turf field, you got to find a way to protect it. You can't just put it there and not find a way to keep, you know, the kids with 4-wheel drives off of it. And the neighbors would not hear of it. And they won the day again. So that's why the master plan of Pamela Park shows a renovation of the large lighted field, and it shows an installation of a new development of a new soccer field that's going to be grass, San Pete, state-of-the-art, just like we've done at Lewis, all three fields at Braemar, and that's a major reason why we haven't gone to artificial turf. So that's another whole battle to fight. Just because maybe you think you got the money to do it, winning that neighborhood battle in the political process has been very difficult.
I want lights, too.
I just had a question. I learned today, I was researching some of these things, that Eden Prairie facility, that's owned by Edina residents. Has there been any communication with the owner, future operators of this place about securing hours at that facility? Have any of the associations talked with them? I mean, could we have discussions with them to try to secure those primetime hours with? Well, yeah, but they're going to want to sell them, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Well, I think they're going to want to sell them, but they wouldn't necessarily have any guidelines about preference for Edina teams or Edina associations. It's not a City of Edina facility, and so it wouldn't necessarily have, the same kind of preferential treatment for Edina associations.
Sure, but if, let's say if we're losing how much money a year on our own dome, if we committed to helping them do something there, that we could secure some hours, I mean,
Well, and I just want to say, what we're talking about is, we're basing this off of a $5 million estimate for a dome, and I don't know why this other estimate that that I've just looked at from 2010 is so much lower. I do think we should try to figure that out, because we could do a dome and 3 fields for $5 million possibly. I don't know.
That'll get us into the site selection process, because you're not going to be able to I don't believe, we can ask an architect, but I don't think you're going to be able to pin the costs of the dome down substantially until you look at site, and we have site selection, and look at the relative costs of site A, B, C, D, and E to all of this. And yeah, some of them may be cheaper, building where there's a parking lot already and where there's an outbuilding that we don't have to put up, and all of the things that go along with this can save capital costs, which does affect the bottom line. But that's that's fundamentally going on a site selection.
There are really only 2 locations in Edina where it could be done clearly could be done for less than $5 million, and they're both on school property. One at the high school and one at the community center campus. Staff has been working this issue for 15 years. We proposed to have this done at Coleman, went through a process, and it was artificial turf, because you can store the mechanicals under the bleachers. It's substantially less expensive than starting over and dealing and pulling in utilities and all that and whatnot. And we lost the day again, because of the neighbors got organized and they killed it. And it was a 5-0 vote on our council. Okay, we're not going to go to Coleman. Now, I don't know much has changed since then. So now that leaves you one other option. I would venture to guess it's the same thing. And that would be to put a dome, but on a much smaller field at the high school. Now, it would give the high school kids easier access to it, which makes a lot of sense to me. But is the school district even interested in that? Do they want to fight the battle with the neighbors? Different. But that's, as far as the money goes, I think those are the only 2 options where it's going to be substantially less than $5 million.
I can tell you at our sports subcommittee meetings, the neighbors, if you're talking about the lower fields at the high school, the neighbors are already organized, and they attended every one of our sports subcommittee meetings because of their concerns regarding placement of a dome field, driving a road through their neighborhood to get to the field, and the sort of other things. So
understandable.
That's not going to be an easy one there.
Do we want to table this discussion until our meeting with City Council in March?
I am not 100% certain. You have a meeting with the City Council in March.
Okay, what are you referring to then? Yeah.
You have a regular Park Board meeting on the 13th. There is a work session of the City Council on March 20th, but that hasn't been determined whether Park Board will be part of that or not. It is it's been discussed, but it is currently, I can tell you, it's currently not scheduled. And I can tell you that depending on your discussion tonight, that may change. If you really want to have a joint session with the council, I think you need to make that recommendation tonight. They are talking of having the sports dome and the Edinburgh study back on their agenda in their own work session on March 20th. If you want to be there and be part of that, I think you need to make that recommendation. And I should clear, I need to, and I hate to call on you, Ann, but isn't that your understanding of how it was left with us?
That's exactly my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I'd entertain a motion if anybody has one.
Well, I think it would be a good idea to meet with the City Council as they're talking about these two issues.
I do too.
So I move that we ask City Council if we can participate in their work session regarding Edinburgh and the Dome.
Second.
Discussion?
I agree with the motion. I'd also like to, I probably can't, we've got a motion on, so, okay. I'll second the motion. Roberts.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I'd like to also move that with the additional information John's going to get us on the alternative fields, that this go back on the agenda for our meeting on the 13th for hopefully a discussion that will lead to a vote one way or the other on what we want to do about this, or at least what we want, whether we want to continue it forward. So.
I just want to offer, I mean, if staff does not have time to talk with the associations, it might be good, there seems to be interest from them to be able to meet. I would be happy to meet with them, you know, and it could be a very short-term working group to try to meet with them before this next Park Board meeting.
I would volunteer myself as well to work that.
Okay, are we creating a work group here now?
Yeah, I'm on the current one. Is the current one done?
Can I ask, this may be a dumb question. You have a sports dome working group now.
Yeah.
That is familiar with the topic.
I agree.
Why is it not, are they not the go-to?
Yeah, let's just have the existing work group for the sports dome continue, and if he's interested in joining, we can do that. And
I make a motion that Member Giske is appointed on the committee.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All right. I just like, as frustrating as this conversation might be here, I just did want to thank everybody that's put a lot of time already up to this point to get it here to us. So that's all I wanted to say. So thank you. All right. Our next item, 7C, appointment to the Community Education Services Board. Is that the position that's vacated by Bill? Is that correct?
That's correct. Bill Lau is off the board, and therefore we have a vacancy on the Community Education Services Board. I think I put in the staff packet the type of commitment we're looking for, and hopefully I haven't heard from anybody that is interested in that, but
not having done my homework, what is the Community Education Services Board?
Community Education Services Board is, well, Kathy, you're probably as familiar as anybody with that. Can you help us describe what its function is? They're advisory in nature to school board?
Right, and they deal with the community ed issues.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. I looked at this one. I can't do it because I teach Thursday nights.
And that community ed would include all the classes, summer programs, programs that they do during, school breaks, those kinds of things. They tend to use facilities, parks, and, buildings around Edina.
If people would just look at their calendars and look at the application and get back to John, that would be great.
That would be great. Thank you.
Item 7D, adoption of the bylaws. Ellen had passed along a couple of amendments that I think made sense. Did everybody see those? Ellen, do you want to explain those?
Right. Okay. So my first proposed change would be on the bottom of page 2, and it is the section on quorum. And I would recommend that we take out in between the parentheses, take out 6 or more from that first sentence. So the first sentence would read, "A simple majority of the voting members constitutes a quorum for any regular or special meeting." And the reason that I am suggesting just to take out the 6 or more is because our board changes in size. When someone is rolling off or has resigned, and before the city council is able to appoint a new member, so there may be a majority of all seated members, but it would not be 6 necessarily. So I would just take that out, and that would be a simple majority of the voting members.
I wish it could be that way. I've had this discussion with our attorney on that language. And the park board by city code is a 12-member board, 2 of which are non-voting. And in order to have a quorum, until these bylaws pass, you have to have 6. Now, even if you have someone who quits, moves, resigns midstream, and all of a sudden you only have 9 voting members that present, you are, by law, it shows that you still have to live by that number 6. The number of the board doesn't change, they're just not here. So just because they're not here, it doesn't change the number of the park board. It's as if they're absent.
But that's exactly why I'm proposing to take out that number 6, because I don't think it has anything to do with a legal issue. I think that this is how we want to operate as a board. We're creating our bylaws, and city code may say that we have so many members, but it also says that a number of other things, that what we're trying to do is that the voting members, if there is no open, I think that what I'm thinking about is it has to do with an open seat. Open seats are no longer voting members.
An open seat is just a seat that's temporarily not filled yet. The requirement to have 6 doesn't change, is what our attorney is telling us.
Okay, so can I make a motion that if it passes legal, we would take out the 6?
Actually, one thing, Ellen, that I'm just thinking here, I think what we're trying to do is have like uniform bylaws for all the boards and commissions. Maybe this is something that we should be running past the city manager's office so that we don't have a one-off set of bylaws here that the other boards.
Do all other boards have 12 members? I don't think so.
Well, the planning commission does, I think.
No, these are not with planning commission.
None?
No, this is, the Art Center Board has the exact same setup we do. But we can certainly ask the question.
Okay, so
but
why don't...
the park board wouldn't No, that's fine, you can,
I would propose this change, and I would propose all my changes, because I'm not an attorney. So
Sure.
I'm the first person to know that
Okay.
you don't look at me if you want Robert's rules or anything like that. But I read this and I thought, well, why should we put a number in when simple majority means simple majority of open seats? So, of non-open seats. So why don't I do this? I would propose all of these changes to go through legal and first before they're passed. And I assume that that's the process that will happen anyway. Okay.
can I ask, what would you prefer to have instead of, if a quorum is not achieved within 15 minutes of the start of a meeting?
The proposed second sentence then is no votes may be taken if a quorum is not established or maintained. Because
Yeah, that's already, yeah, well, that's already addressed.
right,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure what that 15 minutes at the start of the meeting means. Because if we decide to have a meeting and then somebody comes in late, comes in at 17 minutes after the meeting, then are we saying that we can't vote?
Oh, I see, okay. Okay,
So those are the first two on page 2, and then my other one would be on page 3. I would change that the meeting agenda and related materials will be sent electronically and mailed the Wednesday prior to the scheduled regular meeting, because quite frankly, I find that it's very difficult to get through my packet in the number of days that I have. So I would just be proposing that we get it on Wednesday. And then the last one is on page 5. This is on the committees. And this is talking about forming committees. And I would request that we add a sentence there that would allow us to have a chair, a temporary chair, before the committee meets and elects their permanent chair. And the reason is because a chair is you need somebody to call the first meeting. And we kind of came into this a little bit with the dome. We didn't know who was going to be chair, so we didn't know when we were going to meet. Nobody really wanted to kind of say, well, I'm going to say when the first meeting is. So I would just add the sentence, a temporary committee chair will be appointed by the Park Board at the time of committee formation. I would just insert that one little sentence, and that clears it up.
Do you want to just review these with the attorney
That's
and
fine.
bring them back for us?
Well, I think that's fine. You can just vote on them as is. And
You
then
wanna
we'll
vote
see
them as
which
is?
ones, you know,
Okay.
council administration tell us we can and can't do.
Okay.
Can
All in favor?
I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Just a question. So on page 6, when you're talking about the duties of the committee or working group chair, and it says prepare and distribute a written meeting agenda if required. Do you know when it is required?
On page 6 here.
Yep.
Where are we at here?
Bullet point 2.
Prepare and distribute a written meeting
If it's a public
agenda
meeting,
if
it has to do with
required.
if it's a public meeting.
Changing if necessary, and then it's up to the discretion of the chair.
Yeah, that's a fair question, and I'm stumped on that one. I don't have a good answer.
So are you asking if it's required to have an agenda or when? It's-
Right.
I think she's asking when would it be required?
When is the agenda required to come out, or?
No, when isn't it?
Oh, okay. I think that that's covered under public access, based on page 5. If a committee or working group's meetings are designated as public meetings, official meeting notices, written agendas, and written minutes are required.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you.
With the amendments, I would also remind the Park Board in my staff report, I'm asking you to recommend to the council that they grandfather in the Veterans Memorial Committee in its current structure, because if the bylaws pass, it doesn't meet that requirement.
I move
I would-
adoption of that.
Well, let's have a discussion. I agree that right now that's working fine, but I'd like to have a time limit on that. So that, it's, right now, that would mean that, in perpetuity, the same guys are working on this, and they're doing a wonderful job. So I don't want to really mean anything by this, but I do think that these bylaws are talking about kind of limited times for certain committees, and I do think that we should have we should put a time on this.
What do you propose?
I don't know.
You mean time limit on any committee?
We're talking about on the Veterans Memorial Committee.
How about upon completion of the Veterans Memorial? Or would
Oh, we don't know what would that be? I would say I just want a time. So it could be 2 years. I mean, it's going to be done before 2 years.
could take longer?
I don't know.
Can I ask why are you looking for a time?
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is that this is the reason why working groups and committees are included, that the city is recommending that all of them have voices on boards, is because it's important that what they're doing is open and transparent, and so I'm just suggesting that I wouldn't want to set up in our bylaws a committee in perpetuity that doesn't have any members that have the same type of requirements that we are required. Just suggesting that seems as if it's a huge exception and it doesn't need to be. I mean, all working groups it just seems as if we're making an exception in our bylaws for a group that is going to probably not be around for more than 2 years. And I don't think that that's a good idea.
I'm not suggesting there be a change in the bylaws to accommodate, just to ask the council to grandfather in this one exception. Because otherwise, if you put a time limit, what I'm trying to envision, let's say you put a year on it from now, then what are you going to do? You're going to have a new park board member serve on that and take over as chair. See,
And I think that would be appropriate, but I would say 2 years from now. I mean, I would just, you asked me how much time. That gives them plenty of time to do the work that they've done, which is a wonderful job. And then if there's follow-up, if we need to do more on that type of project, then I think it is no longer part of their initial, what we initially suggested their mission was, which was to design and create that. So I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, if you turn back the clock, on more than one occasion, the park board was asked to provide a liaison to serve on the committee. And it was decided back then that we'll let Mike Gorgon serve as the chair, which has done a magnificent job, put in hundreds of hours, and to think that we're going to tell them now that if you don't get it done by a certain time, you're not going to be chair anymore.
No, I would recommend that he be co-chair, because that goes with the bylaws. I'm just saying that there's no reason really to make an exception, a total exception, and just say an ongoing working group without any member on park board. I just am uncomfortable with that.
I'm not at all, and I'd like to get moving tonight, Mr. Chairman. I think John's proposal is a good one, and the group is doing a very good job. Let him get it done.
I agree.
I do have one other question, not totally related, but having to do with our existing working groups back on this public notice issue. So it says under public access on page 5 that based on potential public interest in the topic, some committees and working group meetings may be designated as public meetings by the Edina Park Board or City Council. So right now for my user fees working group, we are putting them all on the city calendar because I was told that they are public meetings. So are all our working groups that are existing currently functioning as public meetings or not?
They should. They should be.
Okay, so then in that case, we do need to create agendas? Okay,
Correct.
okay,
And all of your meetings should be publicized.
okay. Just
Yep.
getting educational information
No,
out there.
that's absolutely
Okay.
right. Yep.
Do we have a motion to approve the bylaws with Ellen's proposed changes and the grandfather exception for the Veterans Memorial Group?
Not with Ellen's changes, I think.
No, I'm talking about with the changes to these bylaws right here.
I thought we were going to run them by legal.
I thought we were going to let legal take a look at them after, if
You can
you're okay
still-
with that, John?
Yeah, you can still make the recommendation in a motion, and we'll find out whether
Okay.
legal and administration can accept it.
Okay.
That's fine.
So I guess I would put that forward as a motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. We have item 7C, Park Board self-assessment proposal. Louise had sent John and I an email. Maybe I'll just let Louise explain it, but
For tonight, and I really want to apologize because this meeting has been so long, and this is going to make it longer. But I've been serving on this board for 2 years. I got on, I think it was in the spring of 2010. And I think over the course of my tenure on this board, we've had some really great meetings, and we've had some meetings that could be greater. I'll just leave it at that. And I think really, as a whole, we have some really talented people, both on the board and on staff. But, you know, every board that I have ever served on, and they've been nonprofit boards, we have always had a regularly occurring self-assessment. And when I talk about a self-assessment, you know, there's sort of a cringing effect, like, oh God, I don't want a report card. That's not what I mean at all. If you look at board self-assessments, I mean, I could rattle off probably a half a dozen standard questions that nonprofit boards on a regularly occurring basis, usually 2 or 3, like every 2 years, every 3 years. I'm not quite sure what would be appropriate for this group, but I do know that at this time we have a change in chairperson. We've got 3 new board members, and I think we could do a better job of what we're doing if we just take a moment to self-reflect and go through the process. But the process will only be an exercise if everyone does not really fully embrace the notion of doing this. And that's why I come to you. And when I called John, I said, you know, can we have some help doing this? Can we get a facilitator? Because it makes it so much easier when you have a neutral going through this process. And we don't have the luxury of doing that. And right now, from what I understand, and and I'm not really suggesting that, you know, we go through a long process, because all of you know, who have been with me these 2 years, I'm not process-oriented, but here's what I think that would behoove the group and cause us to be more effective. And everyone here is here not only to serve the community, but to have an enriching experience. And And let me just rattle off a few things that I could see being in this survey, which, and I'm not reinventing the wheel, there are lots of nonprofit aids out there on the web, and what I would like to do is draft one up, send it to the chairperson, send it to John, solicit your comments, because, I mean, I'm sure we can come up with maybe 2 pages worth of self-assessment questions that we could then figure out a process of going through in a relaxed setting, not at a meeting, to sort of get to know one another better and to make these meetings more effective. And so, you know, I mean, how are we relating to one another? How are we relating to staff? Does every board member feel like they can contribute? Is there some overshadowing going on that we need to work on? What's our board recruitment process like? Do we have diversity issues covered in the board recruitment process? I mean, I don't want to take your time now to go through all these issues that most boards do consider, but really, my thought is really to make this experience better. So, that being said, and me not being long-winded, that's what I would like to hear some thoughts from some of you, or all of you, about what you think of the idea in principle. And if you would also kind of give me your thoughts about how we might go forward doing this.
Can we do this at Bunny's? Louise, I think it's a great suggestion, and having never done anything like that before, I think it would be worthwhile, and if nothing else, an opportunity to have dialogue with one another in a hopefully less formal setting, that we could get to know each other a little bit better. I mean, in my 4 years, there's been people that have come and gone on the board, and I've never talked to them outside of this chamber, and so me personally, I think it's a good idea.
So are you envisioning that there would be a survey that we each would complete, and then there would be some facilitated discussion about that, or how, I guess I'm not really sure how that would work.
I was thinking of putting together for mailing into the park packet, and you know, I don't know whether our next board meeting would be too ambitious, but a survey, and the survey would be a survey that is taken from a nonprofit guidance company. They're available out there, which incorporates input from, I guess, anyone here on the board about what they would like to see added to what we come up with. They would be mailed in the park packet. They would be filled out, signed. I don't think this should be an anonymous kind of survey. They should be signed. And somehow we need to have a process. I would say that the chairperson would compile them, you know, kind of summarize them, and that we would take them to an off-site premises and have a meaningful discussion about where we need improvement, what's working well, what's not working well, and what we could do to make things better.
Louise, I think this is a great idea, and I hope that it will be successful so that other boards and commissions use it down the road. I actually think we've kind of already done this in one form or another citywide when we had that survey on SurveyMonkey to all the boards and commissions about, you know, what your thoughts are on different things. And one thing that I learned from that is that we should have a work plan, and now we have a work plan, and so I think there's a lot to gain from this process, and so I'm very grateful that you brought this forward.
I've been involved in this in the for-profit sector. I do work with companies, and so what you're generally talking about is probably it's at least 2 hours, probably 4, in terms of you do the survey. Usually you have somebody facilitate. They're not cheap, so we will self-facilitate. But by the time you do, you may break up into some small working groups over some of the issues, come back, have broader discussions. You're probably talking about a 4-hour, somewhere between a 2 and 4 hour process. So just to understand what the time commitment's looking like. So it's going to take an afternoon or a 6 to 10 shift in an evening or something. So that's generally the kind of time commitment we're looking at.
I've partaken in one or two of those in the corporate world as well, and they can be very effective, so I think it's a great idea. It can help us work together more efficiently and effectively, which of course would help. Is anyone aware of any other situation? You mentioned one, but is there another formal process that any other board or commission does within Edina that we could model it after a little bit?
Not that I'm aware of.
Also, can we assume that this would be a non-public meeting?
There is no such thing. There is no such thing.
I don't think you can assume that, though. I don't.
Yes, it is safe to assume that it will be a non-public meeting.
I don't think
Oh,
they
it can't?
No, there is no such thing.
We couldn't even have a retreat if we wanted to have a retreat?
All of your meetings are open to the public, your work sessions, everything. The only thing that the law permits a closed session is if it deals with a legal or personnel issue, and that's not the case here.
My suggestion is we take this discussion offline and don't do it as a park board. And, if we want to do something like this, we just do it as private individuals. And we can legally do it as private individuals.
So long as you are not serial meetings through emails, that is unlawful. That's considered a violation of the open meeting law. Can't do that. But you can certainly do things on your own and bring it to the board.
John, could the chair set up an online survey and then the members respond, and then the chair would?
Absolutely. You just can't engage in sharing ideas, thoughts, and whatnot in a conversation. But surveys, certainly, that's perfectly okay.
Louise, since this is your idea here, I'm assuming you're going to take a leadership role in setting up the survey and putting the...
I had not thought about this last issue, so I'll have to do some more research on it.
Okay. All right, well, that was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. 7F, donations policy and naming of parks and facilities work group update. Ellen, please.
No news.
Nothing? Fabulous. User fees.
Outstanding.
Well, sorry, I have news.
All right, Kia, what do you have for us?
So we've focused on youth athletic associations and divided up kind of the different areas to per participant user fee, residency requirement, financial reporting requirements, and tournament policy. And on Sunday, as I mentioned, our working group met with the athletic associations. It was a pretty full room in the community room, and it was we had a great dialogue on the different pressures that the associations are facing, and about how we want to see Edina and these athletic associations succeed going forward. I was happy to find out that the athletic associations generally agreed with the direction of our working group's recommendations. We did gain some insight from them, so we will continue to meet twice a month until we nail down the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now the item that I think you guys have been looking forward to more than I have. 7G, the election of officers. I appreciate you guys letting me stumble through this for the last 7 years and being patient with me. So anyhow, John, you want to take this over?
And thank you for being chair. You've done a marvelous job, and I typically handle this agenda item. The way this works, we will start with nominations for chair, And you can nominate yourself, but if someone nominates another member, then we'll ask, do you accept the nomination? If so, then I ask, are there any other nominations? And if there are, you will vote on those on a secret ballot. We'll hand out little sheets of paper so you don't have to see who's voting for who here. And we will tally it, count it, and for the public record, we will show what the vote was. We just won't have record of who voted which way. I'm not sure that's even legal, but that's the way we've been doing it for years. And once we get through the chair, then we'll do the same, repeat the same process for the vice chair. So, as Joseph mentioned, you've served admirably, and thank you for 2 years. And by city code, you have to step aside as chair. Someone else has to take it over. So,
all right.
Thank you for being chair. So, with that, I would like to open the nominations for chair.
I would like to nominate Kia Steele.
Do you accept that nomination? Are there any other nominations? Going once, twice. Is there a motion to close nominations for chair?
Motion to close.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, congratulations and thank you for your willingness to serve as chair.
Thank you.
Now I open up nominations for vice chair. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Ellen Jones.
Ellen, do you accept that nomination? Yes. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Going once.
I nominate David Deeds.
Okay. Do you accept that?
I'm going to respectfully decline, given my travel schedule.
Okay.
I've got some out of country and other things coming up, so I may not be able to make it. So thank you.
That's why we ask if you accept the nomination or not, but thank you for that. Any other suggestions? Going once? Twice? Do I have a motion to close nominations for vice chair? Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you for serving. Appreciate it.
Kia, come on over here. Isn't this our meeting now?
It's back. Now it's your, Kia has to close the meeting first. Correspondence and petitions.
Thank you again. So we're on item 8, correspondence and petitions.
I don't have any correspondence and petitions to hand. I've been collecting roughly 40 to 60 emails a day on Dome, both Sports Dome and Golf Dome and Edinburgh. And I'm trying to accumulate those and send them in one email so that your mailbox isn't. Yeah, you're welcome. I do not have any petitions. I believe, did we have, Janet, some letters that were copied? And those have been distributed. But we have no petitions, so to speak. That's it for that.
All right, moving on. Chair and board member comments.
I was going to ask what the public process is when, on next month's agenda, Highland Park is going to be on the agenda for, the Soccer Association is asking to remove that softball field. And I'm wondering what the process is for public notification.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. Staff's going to have to get on the stick and get notices out in the mail to everyone within, I'm going to choose 1,000-foot radius of the park. It's going to be expensive. It'll be a lot of mail, and to inform them of what the proposal is that'll be on your agenda. And we don't technically have public hearings, but you would expect them to come and voice their opinion. The letter will state, we encourage you to express your views. If you want to do so, it must be in writing, either by letter, postal mail, or email. Or they can certainly or show up and give public testimony at the March meeting. And we would present the issue, you would hear from soccer, you would close it, you would take public testimony, debate it, make a motion, move on. And we do the same process for Wooddale that we then have on the April agenda. So as you can see, we got a lot of work in front of us.
I had a quick comment. We got a lot of emails, and some of them were saying things like we're falling behind, and I don't mean to sound like I'm getting defensive, but there are a lot of things in this community that we have that other communities don't have. We've got a golf course. We used to have a golf dome. We've got Edinburgh Park, which is a unique facility. You know, there's a lot of things to be proud of, and what made me think of it, too, was this past weekend I took my son and some neighbor kids to skate at the park. And in a winter, which has been really challenged for these ice rinks, and a lot of our neighboring communities have given up even trying to keep and maintain their ice, that ice was totally skatable. I mean, it was amazing. So anyways, that's just kudos to your staff, and let them know that there's a lot of kids that appreciate them still maintaining that effort. So that's what I had.
Thank you.
And I was wondering if you could give us an update on the dome, the golf dome?
Oh, sure. The preliminary guesses, and I did some, they're still under investigation as to how and why it fell. Preliminary looks is there was some faulty wiring in some lights on the northwest corner of the dome that caused the artificial turf to catch on fire. That then spread to the fabric of the dome, which then caused it to start to slowly deflate, and it was windy at 6 in the morning on Friday. That caused it to pull at the building and created substantial structural damage, and also fueled the fire to then burn up the hill. That's the sequence of events they believe happened, because there was no one there at 6 in the morning, and the fire on the hillside was pretty much out by the time the fire department learned about it. We do know that the fabric and turf is a complete loss. The underwriter they've already determined that. They've also determined that the wood structure is not necessarily a complete loss, but it could be repaired. But they've hired an estimator to come in and give us some dollar figures of what it would cost to bring it back to its original condition. We do have insurance, and thankfully for us, it is a total replacement cost insurance. So it's well over $1 million, and that's just for the fabric. That doesn't include the building. So.
We're fighting for the microphone here. So here's a what-if question for you. What if that insurance money was used toward a replacement of the golf dome that maybe had two parts, one that was a golf part and one was an athletic field part?
I think that's something that we're going to have to spend some time giving some thought.
Actually,
it won't get the whole job done, but it's something that
John, we had some discussion on this in the Sports Dome Subcommittee, and the fact is that golf and other athletic uses don't mix because of the very nature of it. So it is two completely separate. It is two completely separate facilities.
Right,
So
but it could be two domes next to each other with a common building. You could take advantage of that.
You could pick common building, and you could pick common building and share parking lots. Yeah, but the buildings themselves, they informed us very clearly. Nope, can't do that.
That is correct. But that is a concept that is being considered. And that concept was considered before the golf dome went down. So.
Yeah, I guess you answered kind of my comment, but I think we understand that there's a great demand, and we'd love to see a dome. And I just think there's something we're missing, some ingenuity, and maybe it has to do with the fire and the rebuilding of that, or something where we can make this work. That's why I was asking about can we do it in stages? Can we open it in stages? Can we have even more mixed use? Maybe more different revenue streams that can make this work. But
there would be some economies to have a shared building, but it's going to require a new location, and that adds to the cost significantly. But it's something that has to be at least looked at. So we intend to do that.
Do you have any additional comments, John?
Members?
Members? All right, moving on, staff comments.
Again, I just want to thank Ann for all the work. She has been pulling a lot of extra duty, wearing a lot of hats, for covering for Edinburgh, being my new assistant director, serving on working groups. She has really done a stellar job with all of that, and thank you. And we're just ecstatic to have Susan Foss join our team. Very sharp, very bright. We got a great future ahead at that. And other than that, I think I want to give kudos also to my maintenance staff for the ice rinks. I think we're probably one of few committees been open as much as we have. Centennial Lakes opened again. Still have 10 inches ice in most areas. We're just a phenomenal job out there. And our own skating rinks are still open, although it's supposed to be 40 degrees tomorrow. So the season is finally winding down. We're going to have to give in to Mother Nature. Other than that, I'm not going to bore you with all the rest of the stuff. I think you know. I don't have any other written report for you, but I appreciate and welcome the 3 new members, and thank you all for what you do.
All those in favor?